Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call this special meeting of Council to order. I'd like to firstly recognize we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk today will be Ms. Sheila Goury. Today's special meeting of Council will be held in accordance with the Community Charter, Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272, and Ministerial Order number M139. Therefore, members of the public are required to observe meetings virtually and not attend in person. Question period will be adjusted throughout the duration of this order being in effect. Council will attend via Zoom at these special meetings, maintaining physical distancing at all times, and members of staff that are partaking in the meeting will be spread out in the boardroom. And the first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items.
Thank you, Your Worship. So for late items today, agenda item 7A, committee recommendations under consent items. We are changing and adding the recommendation, and it's worded as follows: that Council approve the establishment of a food security advocacy group subcommittee and endorse the food security working group guidelines, as well as agenda item 8H, potential capital project discussion.
Very good. I'd ask for a motion for approval of the agenda as amended. Moved Councillor Martman. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bonner.
Second.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion for the adoption of the minutes as circulated. Moved Councillor Bonner. Seconded Councillor Armstrong. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. For the Mayor's report today, a few items. Earlier last week, the Nanaimo Citizens City Council staff joined with British Columbians as we tuned in to listen to Premier Horgan and discuss the province's plan to open up BC again. City staff will be reviewing the province's going forward strategy and taking any necessary actions in that regard. As Council, we have taken steps to ensure that Nanaimo is set for a rapid economic recovery. On May the 5th at a press conference, as many of you know, I announced the formation of the Mayor's Task Force on Recovery and Resilience, being co-led by myself and Councillor Tyler Brown, to address the upcoming economic impacts, community resiliency, and provide a path forward for recovery so that the City and other organizations within the community can focus on urgent current issues. And joining us are 5 community leaders with various and diverse backgrounds. James Byrne, a Regional Managing Partner, Vancouver Island, Myers Norris Penny, MNP. Donna Hayes, Board Chair, Nanaimo Port Authority. Signe Madden, Executive Director of United Way. Deb Saucier, President and Vice Chancellor, Vancouver Island University. And Ian Simpson, Chief Executive Officer, Petroglyph Development Group, Snuneymuxw First Nation. I want to come back to what's happening with the city, though, in a very direct way, and that is, as you can imagine, the possibility of opening any of our facilities, given the complexities around this, it involves a great deal of work and an enormous amount of planning to protect the public interest. That will not be a very easy procedure, and on behalf of Council, I want to thank staff who are engaged in that process as we move forward. The UBCM, COVID-19 Outreach and Advocacy. UBCM, the Union of BC Municipalities, has been monitoring and assessing the impact of COVID on communities. And local governments, as our President, Mayor Maya Tate, UBCM President, has pointed out, the dramatic and sudden loss of revenue is requiring us to rethink budgets to focus on core service delivery and support provincially coordinated response to the COVID-19. At the same time, we are aware of the many residents and businesses in our communities that have seen even greater losses of income and are looking for relief. Obviously, UBCM is concerned. We are concerned. Local governments have identified a number of financial challenges and pressures, including the loss of variable revenue streams, including facility, transit, recreation development, parking, hotel tax, airport. I don't want to list too many. It's a rather depressing list in many respects. The decline in investment coming from invested income, invested funds, additional cost in supporting vulnerable populations, growing public and business and community pressure to reevaluate recently passed tax increases, the potential liability to meet looming financial deadlines, all of these things. And UBCM is engaged on behalf of all municipalities with the provincial government on those. On a very positive note, retired tires tread on new ground, to use the headline. The City of Nanaimo has been selected as a grant recipient under the Tire Stewardships BC, TSBC 2020 Community Grant Program, and we're receiving $27,901 towards new rubber safety surfacing at the Maffeo Sutton Park Playground, which is being upgraded. The Parks, Recreation and Culture Department is using recycled scrap tire materials as a new playground surface. It's durable. It plays rubber play surface meets Canadian Safety Standard Association fall height standards and will be accessible for wheelchairs and strollers. So there is a positive step that's taking place in our own very, very popular Sutton Maffeo Park. We are also happy to announce or re-announce the Find the Golden Bucket contest is back with a twist. The City of Nanaimo Department of Parks, Recreation and Culture is inviting adventurous residents to search for the golden bucket again this year. This time, players will not find an actual golden bucket in the parks, but will be searching for a golden bucket sticker with a QR code on it. Once scanned on a smartphone, the QR code will take participants to a web page where a question on that park will be posted. Once the question has been answered, it can be submitted on that web page for a chance to win weekly prizes and also the chance to win the grand prize of a kayak tour for up to 5 people, courtesy of Coastal Expression Adventure Center, that is valued at $300. Clues will be posted each Wednesday until July 29th on the city's Facebook page, Twitter feed, Instagram, or on the website. So, good luck to those of you who are going to participate. Now, as the weather is getting warmer, and it certainly did this weekend, and I hope everyone had a pleasant Mother's Day, the city would like to remind residents as we seek out a variety of recreational opportunities that it's important to be safe in or near our waters. Within city limits, there are beautiful beaches, isolated islands, lovely lakes, and refreshing rivers for various water sports and activities. And in spite of COVID-19 and facility closures, residents are encouraged to stay safe while near in the water because 64% of drownings that occur in BC happen between May and September of each year. The Life Saving Society website shows that 35% of these drownings occur in relation to boating accidents, i.e. power boats, canoes, and inflatable craft. Contributing factors to the drowning were a failure to utilize a personal flotation device, would you please wear your life jackets, and absent or distracted supervision of children. Parents should always ensure that they are within arm's length reach of their children while around water because drowning can occur in as little as 4 seconds. And as we move into the summertime, I want to remind everyone, because it seemed to be a very busy weekend here in Nanaimo, that social distancing is still crucial. Washing your hands regularly, wearing a mask if you can, practicing all of those things that have kept the rate of COVID infection on Vancouver Island significantly low, and significantly lower indeed than the rest of the province. That wasn't achieved without sacrifice. This is no time to let up until we hear very direct rules and regulations, if you will, or directions from the province, which are coming. The Premier's announcement last week gave us some guidance, but again, I encourage all of you to please be cautious. Please think of your neighbors. Think of who you might infect quite innocently. On that note, we're moving on to consent items. Ms. Gurry, we have a committee recommendation. And I'm looking for a motion and discussion around the establishment of a food security advocacy group.
So, Your Worship, because it's under consent items, we just need a motion to move the consent items from somebody.
Councillor Brown, seconded Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Reports. It's the 2020-2024 Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw. Ms. Legan, please.
Thank you, Your Worship and Councillors. I'd like to introduce property tax rate bylaw for first, second, third, and readings and adoption. Just quickly, summary points. The 2020 property tax increase will be 4.5%. The financial plan amendment bylaw must be adopted by this May 15th. And this bylaw will allow staff to calculate and collect the 2020 property taxes. And as we all know, annual property taxes help to fund city services, programs, and capital programs. And I'm happy to take questions.
Very good. Questions from any councillors? I think we've trod this ground quite a lot. Councillor Martin?
I'll motion that financial plan amendment bylaw 2020 number 7307.01 to amend the 2020-2024 financial plan as first reading.
Is there a seconder?
Seconded.
Councillor Thorpe, all those in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Bonner, you're opposed, and Councillor Turley?
That's right.
All right. Motion carries. Councillor Martin?
Motion that financial plan amendment bylaw 2020 number 7307.01 pass second reading.
Seconded.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? Councillor Bonner?
Thank you, Your Worship. Having had an opportunity to review the new mill rate that's coming out, I took the opportunity to do a lot of research with the BC Assessment and created an application that actually figures out your tax rate for the new year, including comparing it with last year's. And I just wanted to reiterate that I believe that this is a good financial plan. It's just the wrong time for it. And so because what's going to happen is our tax increases that we are giving out are going to affect people much more differently than is set up in the bylaw and the staff report, where it refers to the average price. What I found out is that demographically wise, the lower end houses have increased more than the average, and so some of those prices, and they typically are in the south end of the city, will be receiving tax increases, some of up to $600 a year. And these are possibly, and I can't say for sure, but demographically wise, these will be the people who bought lower end houses because that's all they could afford at the time. And those are the people that are most affected, I think, by this COVID shutdown of our economy. And I think it's just something that we should be aware of when we do our tax budgeting, of how it's going to affect the majority of people. So I just wanted to bring that forward, just so for your own information. If you do go on BC Assessments, I found out through a lot of research that you can actually quickly figure out what your tax increase is going to be. It's basically 3% more than what your house either went up or went down. And that's usually within a 0.3 of a percentage point. Just to give you a bit of a heads up there. So if your house increased 15%, your tax increase is going to be 18%. Thank you.
Councillor Martin?
Just a very quick response to that. Even if we did a 0% property tax increase, they would still have a humongous tax increase. So I'm not sure if I can swallow that debate. Thank you.
If I may comment, property taxes, as I think all of us agree, are a poor way to raise revenue in society. Far better that everything is as much as possibly based on income tax. But as I've said before, if you bought low and it's gone up substantially, yes, your taxes, as Councillor Bonner has pointed out, will be higher, or arguably be based on previous year's valuations. But on the other hand, you've picked up a great deal of non-taxable equity that didn't exist before, whereas somebody who perhaps stretched themselves to go into the $700,000 range and hasn't seen an increase at all has picked up no taxable benefit or increase to their wealth. I mean, it points out the problems in the system, but we can't set a tax rate that varies on when you bought and how you bought and your personal financial circumstances. We can only do the rough and ready measures that we do within our existing legal system and our taxation system, and I'm sympathetic to what Councillor Bonner's had to say. But on the other hand, speaking as the father of a son and his wife who purchased in the South End and have seen a dramatic increase, I just want to assure him my son's just gleefully counting every extra dollar that he's managed to pick up, far more substantially so than his parents, who have a modestly better house in Departure Bay. So it's not perfect, but it's the system we have to work under, unfortunately. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I can't support the tax increase for the following reasons. I'm not convinced, and it's one of the reasons that was given by some councillors, that next year is going to be worse. Over the weekend, I helped out at the shop organizing deliveries, and it was a record year. There seems to be a lot of pent-up demand to get out and spend money again. We actually did just over 800 deliveries, which was up about, I think the highest year we had previous was 600, so it was significantly increased. We expected that people would not be coming around the store, so the walk-in trade would be lower. That didn't happen. There were people trying to keep the social distancing within the store, but certainly the number of internet orders and phone orders was significantly up. In fact, tried to cut things off. I think the website they put down Thursday night and stopped taking orders over the phone late Friday afternoon. We still received well over 100 orders for delivery this week. So that was a pretty rosy picture, and we misjudged. I told the staff that I thought, expect it to be a lower year, and I was way up. So I know there are industries and businesses that are suffering, but to think that all businesses are going to suffer is just not true. And so I think that as we're coming out of this concern about next year being a worse year, I'm not convinced that's the case, so I can't support this motion. Thank you.
I was going to say thank you very much, Councillor Turley, and I'm sure it was one of your best unintended puns when you described things as rosy.
You bet.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Councillors Bonner and Councillor Turley, motion carries. Councillor Martman?
Motion that financial plan amendment by law 2020 number 7307.01 pass third reading.
Seconded. Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillors Bonner and Turley. Councillor Martin, that motion carries. Councillor Martman.
Motion that financial plan amendment by law 2020 number 7307.01 be adopted.
Seconded. Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillors Turley and Bonner. Motion carries. And the next is the 2020 property tax rates bylaw. Ms. Ligon.
Thank you, Your Worship and Councillors. As a follow-on to the financial plan amendment bylaw just adopted, the property tax rates bylaw then allows staff to assess the tax for each property, and it's being put forward for first, second, third readings and adoption.
Motion that property tax rates by law 2020 number 7309 to set the property tax rates for 2020 pass first reading.
Seconded. Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillors Turley and Bonner. Motion carries.
Motion that property tax rates by law 2020 number 7309 pass second reading.
Seconded. Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Councillors Turley and Bonner. Motion carries. Councillor Martman.
Motion that property tax rates by law 2020 number 7309 pass third reading.
Seconded. Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillors Turley and Bonner. Motion carries.
Motion that property tax rates by law 2020 number 7309 be adopted.
Seconded.
Seconded. Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next, item C, internal borrowing resolution.
And I'm going to, thank you, Your Worship, Councillors. I'm going to turn over C, D, and E to Ms. Mercer.
Very good, Ms. Mercer.
Thank you, Your Worship. In the 2020-2024 financial plan, there is a budget line item to fund the sanitary sewer DCC Millstone Trunk South project for 2020. And as the sanitary sewer DCC reserve fund does not have sufficient funds to fund it, we are borrowing from the drainage DCC reserve fund, which does have an appropriate amount of money. And this borrowing will be repaid by sewer operations over 20 years at 2%. So best practice requires an internal borrowing resolution for the additional funding. So we're looking for that from council.
Very good. Councillor Marmon.
Motion that council approve additional internal borrowing from the development cost charge, what is that, the actual motion? In the amount of $672,600 in 2020 to fund the sanitary sewer DCC project SS19 Millstone Trunk South for a 20-year term at an interest rate of 2%. Repayment of the internal borrowing to be from sewer operations.
Seconder. Councillor Armstrong. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is quarterly purchasing report, single and sole source purchases in excess of 150,000 instances of non-compliance purchases. Ms. Mercer.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the purpose of this report is to provide council with information regarding, say, sole source, single submission purchases, and policy compliance per the city's current procurement policy. And this is for the quarter ending December 31st, 2019. Appendix 1 outlines our sole and single source purchases for the quarter. Appendix 2 outlines our purchases that were made over $250,000, and Appendix 3 outlines the instances of non-compliance with the procurement policy.
Any questions for Ms. Mercer? Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not sure if it's Ms. Mercer would be able to answer or Mr. Harding, but the issue about the NDSSS artificial turf, I'm trying to recall when it was installed, but it was probably 3 or 4 years ago anyway. And I'm wondering how the repairs that were required, are being required, how that compares with the durability of the Devon Park artificial turf surfaces.
Mr. Harding's in the back room if you want him.
I don't have an answer to that.
We're bringing Mr. Harding
If we
in.
can just wait a couple seconds, we've got Mr. Harding in the room.
Sorry, I had to ask a difficult question.
Nothing's difficult for Mr. Harding.
I know.
Sorry, I was delayed in the other room. I thought it was this simulcast. So I'm watching you in the other room, but you're delayed. I'm sorry, Your Worship.
Would you like me to ask it again? Or
Please, if Councillor Turley asks your question.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. To you, to Mr. Harding. I'm trying to remember when the artificial turf A was put at NDSS. My memory is 4 or 5 years ago, but it could be more or less. But my main question is, how does the durability of that one compare to the one at Devon Park? As I see where part of the issue is repair work.
Yes, Your Worship. So this is, if you remember, unfortunately, we had that severe vandalism when they set fire to the middle of the field with a bonfire. And so there was substantial damage. We had to bring in the company that had to ship in the new carpet and the new underpad and have the work done. So that's, if you're asking both the question. So it's nothing about the durability of the product. It's very good. It's very similar to the product that we have in the other fields. It just, this was the one and only severe vandalism we've had on the artificial turf fields over the years.
Good, thank you. I'd forgotten that. Thanks.
Any other questions on the purchasing report? Councillor Bonner?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a quick question, staff, if I may. I think it's on page 2, the last page of the report, top part refers to, due to staffing constraints, the city is not able at this time to undertake internal audits or reviews. Do we expect that to take place in the future, or will we just be updating our flag non-compliance issues going forward? Thank you.
Ms. Mercer.
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Bonner. until we have additional resources in the department, in-depth look at all purchases cannot be done based on the current capacity. So if we do get additional staff in there, that would be something that would be attached to their role. I'm not sure, did I answer the question?
Councillor Bonner?
Yeah, that's fine. That's an answer. Thank you.
All right, the next item is automated garbage trucks, equipment financing. Ms. Mercer.
Thank you, Your Worship. In the 2020-2024 financial plan, there is a budget line item for the purchase of a new automated garbage truck for 2020. And we will be using the MFA equipment financing program for short-term borrowing to fund the purchase. And as part of the borrowing application, we need a specific council resolution giving permission before we can proceed. So we're here today looking for that.
Councillor Martin?
Motion that council approve the borrowing of up to $406,585 through the Municipal Finance Authority's MFA Equipment Financing Program to purchase one additional automated garbage truck in 2020.
We have a seconder? Councillor Armstrong? Any discussion on this? Councillor Thorpe?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll certainly support the recommendation, but my question is, should we be considering borrowing to buy a second truck? We know that we're expanding our routes. There's a need for more trucks, and it seems to me, if my memory is correct, in the past year we had some mechanical breakdowns that did not have vehicles that could fill in. So are we cutting things too close to the line just by ordering one truck? Thank you.
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Thorpe. We have, in the budget for 2022, we have an additional garbage truck, a new one, which we will order in 2021. And 2019, we purchased two used garbage trucks from Kelowna, I believe. And those are filling in the gaps until the new truck comes online. So yes, there is one coming in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is the Green Fleet Strategy. Mr. Sims.
Thank you, Your Worship. I feel like, what was her name? Saturday Night Live? And
I know.
Melissa McCarthy.
driving that podium.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to switch over to a shared view and get your PowerPoint up there. And then you should probably use the microphone too, Bill.
He's pulling up.
And Your Worship, could you ask if council could save their questions to the end, and then that way I might not be able to see them all, or they can speak out loud, whichever you prefer.
Council, if that's agreeable to you, if you could save your questions until the end, Ms. Gurry's request. Given technology, it's hard for us to spot. We can only see a few of you, and it may, unless you have a really pressing question, in which case you're going to have to yell over Mr. Sims, and then I'll recognize you.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's a pleasure to be here in front of yourself and council. I'm a poor substitute for Mr. Evans, who prepared the bulk of the work, and Ms. Ray, who's here in the audience with her, that worked extensively with Mr. Evans on preparing a Green Fleet strategy. So I'd like to acknowledge both of their work, and I'm just sort of a stopgap, so forgive me if I can't convey it as enthusiastically as Jason. So council's aware that in June of last year, you've asked us to join the E3 fleet group and develop a Green Fleet strategy. So that's precisely what Mr. Evans and Ms. Ray did. They went through the route. Do you want me to pick this up?
Yeah, we're making smaller for the others right now. just hold it there, yeah. That's-
Is that better? So went through the review with the E3 council. Is this mic not working?
Sounds like it's not.
Perhaps we'll just wait a minute while Jessica performs a miracle in that.
Maybe
Sound
batteries might
booth.
be a miracle.
This is not unlike any song. Battery's dead.
So just either talk really loud or we'll get you some new batteries if we haven't.
Like Sean Spicer over on my podium a little closer to the overhead mic. So
Good job.
I'll talk a little louder. So essentially, the Green Fleet strategy is really part of our climate adaptation, our climate action plan. And we have already council's energy conservation policy that Mr. Pamager works extensively on, but this dovetails in beautifully with that. So E3 Fleet is a brainchild of the Fraser Basin Council, and it stands for Energy, Environment, and Excellence, and it's really about providing a measure and benchmarking and standards for any fleet, whether it's municipal or utility or commercial, to up their game as far as the management of their fleet. And of course, the main thrust is around environmental performance. So reducing greenhouse gases, of course, fuel efficiency, and at the same time, this is going to make economic sense. So as I mentioned, in June 2019, we joined the E3 Fleet group, and in the fall, we went through and conducted the review, and this, the Green Fleet strategy that's attached to the report talks some of the key performance indicators. So it's really around continuous improvement on our fleet. The next section, the next sort of stage, once you've gone through the fleet review, which talks about how is your fleet used, how has it been reviewed in the past, and what's the trend, you have the opportunity to seek a rating on your fleet. So the city has done that rating process, and we were awarded a silver by E3 Fleet, and Tandy's got the box that she can present to her worship right now, his worship right now. A beautiful glass structure. Appropriately socially distanced.
That is lovely.
First for clapping.
Smattering of applause for
First for the next council.
So I'm not getting, the presentation is not,
okay.
just one second.
There it is.
Well, that's very strange. So can everyone see the presentation now?
Sure can.
Great. So having gone through the review, having gone through the review, and we now have a benchmark for our own fleet, but it's also compared to a number of other fleets across the country. So the city of Nanaimo is now the only rated fleet that has been rated by E3 on the island. There's a number of other ones in the Lower Mainland, but similar to the City of Guelph and City of Hamilton, they're sitting at a silver. City of Vancouver is at a level of gold, which gives us something to shoot for. And there's one fleet, which is the City of Richmond, is at platinum. And so other utilities like Fortis are at City of Gold, but there's a considerable amount of effort and energy that goes into getting that rating up.
So, I'm sorry, in the city of Victoria?
I don't believe they're rated at this point.
Oh, very interesting. Thank you, Mr. Sims.
I think Mr. Evans had issued a challenge to other fleet managers on the island to join the E3 fleet program and get themselves reviewed and rated. So the backbone of the Green Fleet strategy is these three key goals: reduce fuel consumption, look for alternative fuels for use, and shift the fleet more towards electrification. So reducing fuel consumption really comes down to getting the right vehicle, the right fit for the right purpose, but also driver behavior. So this is really around hard driving, idling, and so on and so forth. The city has a number of policies already in place, and we do have a driver trainer, but the driver trainer does the work off the corner of their desk. And so there's not this ability to continually monitor and remind folks. So that's one thing that's contained within the fleet strategy, is the potential for an additional staff person to do that. And we will be considering that in the future. And we're shifting, there's a graph a little bit later on, shifting for our alternative fuels. So compressed natural gas is a big one for our sanitation fleet. More recently, the fleet group has shifted over to propane. We've got a number of pickup trucks that are being converted to propane, which is a much cleaner burning, lower cost fuel. And of course, the shift to electric. That's probably the single biggest effort that we can undertake there. So just a few graphs that show interest. So we've seen overall a decrease in fuel consumption, both gasoline and diesel. We're shifting also from the 5% biodiesel to 20% biodiesel during the summer months, and that's starting this year. So when this was first initiated, this is our fleet greenhouse gas emissions. And we're on target. Essentially, the target is the green line, and the red bars are the actual GHG emissions. One of the large contributors is the credits that we get for the green waste recycle or composting program. And this just shows the difference between all of the distribution, I guess, of all of the various fuel types and where we are expending carbon emissions. So currently 22% of the fleet use alternative and 29% uses biodiesel, which is quite good. And we'll be growing the propane as we purchase more pickup trucks. I believe that's the end of the presentation. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sims. If I can just confirm something, the 17% reduction in diesel and the 4% reduction in gasoline, that is on the total volume as it existed
That's correct.
11 years ago.
That's correct. Rather than per capita, as it were. Yes, that's correct.
And during that time, the city has seen significant growth in terms of its population as well.
Correct.
So it's an even more impressive figure. And I just want to emphasize this point. Regardless of who's in office and sits around the council table of the mayor's office, staff in this city have continued to carry on doing good work, unsung, often unnoticed, apart from this award that has been presented today. The good work carries on, regardless of what the politicians are talking about. I don't mean to disparage politicians, but I'm just saying it's a good reminder in these COVID times of the good work that is done by many people who don't get regularly noticed and observed. So I want to offer my very sincere congratulations to all the staff over the years who participated in ensuring that we got this award and continue to work hard to show us the way, if you will. Councillor Marvin.
I just noticed there was one slide I think it's important, and that's the initiatives we've done to date. So I can read them off.
Councillor Marvin, please.
4 hybrids, 21 propane CNG pickup trucks, 9 CNG garbage truck fleet, 5 fully electric cars, and 5 fully electric ice resurfacing machines. So I think that's awesome. Thank you, staff.
Here, here. Anyone else? Councillor Thorpe and then Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Sims, thank you very much. An interesting report. I was especially, I felt I learned a lot by reading about the biodiesel section. My question is, I didn't find in the report, maybe I just missed it, do you have any information on relative costs as our fleet is getting greener? And that's a good thing. But fuel costs in all sectors are varying greatly, and I'm just wondering, is it costing us more to go greener? Are we breaking even relatively, or is there any data that you have on that as yet? Thank you.
It's an excellent question, Your Worship. Through Your Worship, to Councillor Thorpe's question, I think the data is there. I can't recite it for you off the top of my head, but I will note that a lot of the shift in purchasing fleet vehicles goes to life cycle costs. So we're looking at the optimum age of a vehicle, the overall preventative maintenance, and of course fuel and so on. But with the lens of the life cycle costing, we're always targeting the lowest, which also happens to be the least greenhouse gas emissions as well. So that's the shift that will be going. That's kind of the work that we have in front of us. We do have the cost. I'm not sure what it is. It's in the $600,000 to $700,000 range annually in fuel. It is just sort of spitballing off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to staff, if I may. Just a question regarding electric vehicles and our policies on those. I understand that they're more readily available as sedans and those type of passenger cars. I know that a number of, or some trucking companies that build trucks are building electric vehicle trucks. How are we purchasing our vehicles? Do we put more emphasis on trying to get an electric version, if it's available, than more than diesel? And I do understand that some trucks require the power of a diesel as opposed to electric, so I'm just curious how we're doing on that front.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through Councillor Bonner's question, I think that's excellent, and it touches on a point that I didn't make, which is that each time a vehicle needs to be purchased, the fleet manager works with the user department to determine the correct or the right size vehicle. And the encouragement, the trend is definitely more and more towards electrification of the fleet overall. So if it's a passenger vehicle or a bicycle even, we'll look for the electric alternative before we'll look at a fuel-based one. And right within, I believe it's within the strategy, or at least certainly in the E3 review, where it's encouraging us to consistently and constantly be on the lookout for appropriate vehicles. So this is a rapidly evolving field. If we can have a large electric truck that works and suits the needs of the operation, then that's certainly going to be looked at. Again, in the context of that life cycle cost. Typically, initial cost is more expensive, but the life cycle is often less.
Anything further? Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to staff. I'm curious about the organization that is doing the rating for us. So what I understand from the report is that they're basically consultants that allow us to use how many electric vehicles and compared to, overall, the overall number of vehicles we have and what we're trying to do in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. They give us a snapshot of where we are, a baseline, and then tell us how we can do better. Is that accurate?
It is accurate on a high level. It's this it's a fairly extensive audit of the city's process. It took several person-hours of work and extensive document review or sort of records review to benchmark all of those various key performance indicators like mileage, fuel use and type, age of vehicles and all that sort of stuff. The next stage in this would be a broader asset management picture, which really looks at what are the optimum ages and capital replacement program. A lot of that's in play already. This sort of puts that global lens on the entire fleet. But yes, you're accurate.
If I may, I think I'm curious, it seems like a very extensive process, and that's great. Is it helping us make our decisions any differently as a result of having this data? Or are we, already kind of going along this road and this is helping affirm our decision making? Or are they giving us new things to shoot for?
I think like many things, staff was already going along the road. But providing a solid framework like the Green Fleet Strategy allows a coherent approach to managing the fleet, and it gives us something to strive to improve. So I think, for instance, we've had an anti-idling policy in place for a good number of years, but it's the management of it, it's the activation of the anti-idling policy that kind of gets left behind. We bring it out with great fanfare, but if you don't consistently reinforce it, and that's what the strategy is for as an example, is just to continually improve ourselves and to measure our improvement as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? If not,
I just have a quick comment.
Councillor Gesselbach.
Thank you, Worship, through you to Mr. Sims. I really appreciate the presentation. I think that's excellent that we're part of a larger program where we're learning best practices, that we're monitoring our metrics and setting goals, and I think that's the right recipe to keep driving change and success. So thanks for this, and yeah, hope to see programs like this and the goal setting and metric measuring expanded to all areas. So thank you.
Councillor Marvin.
Motion that council adopt the City of Nanaimo Green Fleet Strategy 2020.
Seconder. Councillor Armstrong. All those any discussion? Councillor Thorpe.
No, I was just ready to vote, Your Honor, Your Worship.
Very, very, very good, Councillor. I appreciate the enthusiasm. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Sims.
Thank you, Your Worship.
The next is a G Advocacy Framework. Ms. Guri.
I'm just going to come sit.
You can drive the desk or you can sit at the table.
I'm just going to come join you here because last time I tried to talk, not everybody could hear me from that corner. So thank you, Your Worship and Council. This is part 2 of the advocacy framework discussion that Council first had on February 24th at a Governance and Priorities Committee meeting. So at that meeting, you had a lengthy discussion about advocacy and what it meant to each one of you, and a roundtable kind of discussing the what you wanted to advocate for, and kind of settling maybe on a couple of topics. Since then, a number of things have happened, COVID-19 being the most significant. And I did go back and listen to that day back in February, as well as some other conversations that Council has had since then. And I think I tried to capture what you talked about then and kind of what you're looking for in the report that I wrote on page 87 of your agenda. So at that meeting, you workshopped through what advocacy strategy would look like and what your expectations were. You had a discussion, and there was some discussion about advocacy and what that looks like when it's done effectively, and not just to advocate for the sake of advocating. So basically getting a framework and coming back to you with that framework and what that would look like. And then from there, staff could go away and come back with, I think, the main criteria that I think that you are after, which would be no matter what topic it is that you are looking to advocate for, that be a united, cohesive, all of council is behind this topic and this item that you wish to go advocate to other levels of government for, and that criteria would be based on the fact that it's in council's strategic plan or supported by other city plans, that there is common interest with other stakeholders or community partners. As you all are well aware, the more partners that you have when advocating for a topic, the more successful you'll be at your advocating efforts or advocacy efforts. And what are the benefits to Nanaimo, either the taxpayers of Nanaimo as a city council issue or Nanaimo as a whole? So speaking of items such as increasing hospital capacity and what our hospital in the region has to offer, that would support the community as a whole, but not specifically Nanaimo taxpayers. Well, it would, but it's not a city issue or owned issue. So in that case, you would almost be a stakeholder or a community partner supporting the main efforts of that advocacy item. And is there support from and inclusion from Sunemu First Nations? So that's a consideration when you're looking at advocacy type things. So just some criteria into the topics that you choose to go forward and advocate for. Is there that community tie-in, that partnership? Is it part of our strategic plan or other city plans? And then from that, once that's all been determined, what are the key messages? And an effective advocacy strategy should have about 3 key messages that you all are in agreement on. So as some councillors have said, when you're in the elevator, you have that elevator speech, and or when an opportunity for advocacy that's outside of the traditional realms of advocacy, like AVICC, UBCM, FCM, that you know the topic and the advocacy substance well enough that you can just say it off the top of your head, and that all of council is kind of all behind it and all on the same page because you've decided on it at this table. So I think I've captured what you talked about on February 24th and since then. And now today I thought there's a couple topics that came up on February 24th, but there's also a conversation that's coming up next on the agenda on capital projects, that if council wanted staff to go away with a few items, not just the ones listed in my report, but maybe the ones that were on your addendum, and come back with those 3 key messages and the methods of advocacy. So is it provincial government, federal government? Is it letter writing? Is it meetings with ministers? Is it applying for grants because those are available because of the COVID-19 matter and there's federal and provincial dollars available? So part of advocacy, if you remember that we talked about in February, is that not just to advocate for the sake of advocating. So filling an inbox full of letters isn't necessarily an effective way, so timing is really important, and grant funding also when it's available is also important to be prepared so that when it becomes available, we have this package ready to just go and send, and council has that 1-2 pager of the notes and the key messages that you're all on the same page with. So I think for process-wise today, if you all wanted to just comment on that line of thinking, and the mayor could possibly go around and see if you had any problems or comments on that, and staff could go away and come back in the future with the nailed down topics. That's it, Your Worship.
Thank you, Ms. Curry. Council.
I think Joe.
Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, I'm really big on advocating for changes to the judicial system, because that's one of the big issues that we're hearing from our citizens all the time about the in and out, where the same prolific offenders in the court, sometimes 4 times a week, they're back on the streets. I think we need to look at that, especially now when our court system is going to be so backlogged, and they're releasing so many people, and they're just back into our community continuing to commit crime. So that's something I'd like to look at. Thank you.
Who's next? Councillor Turley, Hemmons, and Thorpe in order. Councillor Turley.
Yeah, I just had to unmute myself. I actually just have a question to the potential stakeholders. I see listed there as City's Economic Development Committee. I wasn't aware we had one, so I'm assuming that's coming up after the task force is completed its their job.
Thank you, Councillor Turley. This is Ms. Faroki's document, so she might have meant the task force.
Yes, my fault.
So that's an error.
Okay.
It should have said the task force.
That makes more sense. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. I'm actually going to pass just for now.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I like the document, especially the summary on page 99. I think it would be an interesting GPC meeting at some point to just brainstorm what our main areas that we want to see us advocate for and develop our 2 or 3 main speaking points on each of those. Because I think those briefing notes and highlights are very important, short and sweet and to the point. And I guess the only other comment I would make is that although yes, we all want to be singing the same tune, there are certain issues where we need to identify if one person is the contact point for speaking to an issue, and that of course usually would be the mayor. So that's something that we would need to keep in mind as well. Thank you.
Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Worship. So thank you, Councillor Thorpe. On that same page 99, the template, it kind of takes from what was in my report and put it into the considerations, and it does have that spokesperson spot there where that would be determined by this group as well and in the overall strategy. So you would decide your who, your what levels of government or partners are you going to advocate for, and sometimes the mayor does have special powers that are laid out in the community charter. Sometimes it might be a chair of a committee or a task force that would be the main spokesperson, but that would be determined at this table. And any topics for advocacy efforts that this table agreed on would be what we would develop the 3 key messages for, and that you would all have that in your back pocket and available to share and be on the same page. And then to Councillor Armstrong's point about the judicial system, I think that's great, and I think that might be one of the ones where the city would be that partner that's advocating for that benefits the entire community, but that's not a city function. However, we obviously are a part of the community and would want to put whatever weight the city has and the council has behind that in advocacy efforts. That's just my thoughts on that initially.
Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for the report and both documents that were presented out there. I'm still not sure how we're proceeding in that. Is it our desire to pick a topic that we wish to advocate on and then figure out a strategy for it? Or, and it's been talked about in the past, where we're taking a strategy and fitting our topics into that. I'm more of the opinion we should pick a topic and figure out a strategy type of thing. I just wondered if that's how we're going forward on this. And one of the items in the report, and I'm not picking on anybody here, honestly, is in the background material. I don't remember the talk about treatment centers. It was really only mentioned once in therapeutic centers, of which we have 2, if you count the jail, already in town. But I know we did talk about affordable housing strategies and supportive housing strategies, that sort of thing. So I'm just wondering where we're going forward next. Are we here to pick topics, which I'm fine with, or we're here to develop a strategy for both?
Ms. Curry.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Councillor Bonner. So when I re-listened to the February 24th, at the end of the meeting, the 2 topics that I heard came out of it were treatment centers and affordable housing, not just supportive housing, but affordable housing. and that between those two topics, that would kind of address the overarching issue of Nanaimo that was going on and during February 24th. However, treatment centers could be health centers, or it could be called something else that is supported in the affordable housing strategy. We're not quite addressed in that strategy, but addresses other things. And as for the process, today, because you're there via Zoom and working through the whole framework right now, my understanding from re-listening to the meeting and being at the meeting was that you had kind of picked those two topics, though like I said at the start of today, that may have changed due to COVID-19 and issues going on. So you may want to revisit those two topics. However, you might want more topics too. It doesn't have to be just two. But if you're okay with that framework that's attached on page 99 and the criteria outlined in the report, we would use that framework and come back to you and have you okay that strategy going forward. So staff would go away and do that work, that 1 or 2 pages on your variety of topics, and come back for you to okay it. But the framework that's outlined and attached is the what, the who, the how, and is it supported by plans? So it's almost like coming back to the business case and the 3 key messages if you select a number of topics today, and then you can agree on it in the future.
Councillor Brown and then Councillor Hemmons.
I believe Councillor Hemmons had her hand up before I did.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship. I'm still slightly confused on process. I did go back and try to watch as much of that last meeting I could, and it seems like we're spending effort and continually getting to the same place, where I think what we're really doing is just picking topics and flushing them out, which is what I thought we would be doing today. On that, I think, we have 2.5 years left of our term, so I would prefer that the foundation of any topic is rooted in existing plans or existing evidence or existing intent and will, with, where possible, with provincial alignment. And I understand at certain points there will be some deviations from that because it is advocacy. If we are, I'm not sure, are we workshopping ideas right now or are we not? Reviewing that video, I didn't think there was any conclusions. Actually, I thought there was a lot of items that still needed to be talked and worked through, especially on the health and housing file and exactly what everybody meant by what they were saying. I just echo Councillor Bonner's. I'm not sure exactly what the intention here is.
Thank you, Worship. Through the Councillor Brown. So given the feedback, maybe I was incorrect on where you landed on topics, so it would be topics, and then you get in line with the couple of topics that you want to come back with, and if you agree with the framework that's in the report, staff would come back with the how we would advocate the timing, the province or the federal grants or monies or partnerships that we have, and the key messages.
I think in fairness that we have, well, we'll call it 3 essential paths. One is advocacy for things over which we have no control and are not expected to contribute. One is advocacy for things where we look to a government for contribution, and the other is advocacy for those things that may not exist or we think should exist, whether it be with federal or provincial support or simply on our own, and what is it we wish to lead the way on. I think clearly the social issues, particularly around homelessness, housing, etc., affordability, the crime that Councillor Armstrong referred to in terms of the revolving door, particularly people with severe issues who do seem to go in and out of the court system without any benefit to them or the community. All of those things are topics, and I think what Ms. Gurry's looking for today is areas where we agree these things should be priorities or potential priorities, some sort of report from staff as to what we can do, and then try and bring it back to earth at something tangible. We have a letter from our Member of Parliament saying, please tell me what, essentially, I'm being crass, your shopping list is for Ottawa, and I'm happy to carry it to Santa Claus and hope that we get delivery on it. The same arguably applies for our MLA, Ms. Malcolmson and Ms. Stillwell and Mr. Routley. The issue is, what do we want and what are our priorities? Because, we can't ask for everything and expect that we're going to get everything. So we're trying to sort out those priorities. And as I say, some of it involves strictly the province. Now, with the Health and Housing Task Force, we're obviously in a situation where we are trying to, with the good work of Councillors Bonner and Hemmons, trying to bring together largely provincial bodies, organizations, however you wish to phrase it, to do what we generally acknowledge isn't being done or hasn't been done adequately, is the kindest thing we can say, that's left this city with a significantly larger homeless population, many whom suffer from severe mental health issues and addiction issues, and who contribute to a significant crime problem, have been left alone and forgotten. So what is it we want from the province? Do we want money for capital projects? Because that's the next topic, and I think Ms. Curry very nicely introduced this earlier today when she talked about that, trying to hint as broadly as she could in a delicate way that we obviously have to settle on a list of things where we expect provincial and or federal contribution. So yes, the strategy, and what is it? And the strategy for some may be different. Councillor Markman wisely pointed out to me earlier in a conversation today, often it's just about the timing. The federal government seems to be opening up its purse pretty widely lately. Perhaps this is the time for us to have the shovel-ready projects that Mr. Sims' office maybe has in line, and we advocate for those because we think we've got a chance of winning. Perhaps we back off on other issues. I think there's no question that the province, dealing with the issues at Topaz Park in Victoria and Oppenheimer, clearly wants to move on the housing, homelessness related issues. The minister has assured me that Nanaimo's not been forgotten, obviously, even though those projects were announced for those particular cities. But it does take time, and the staff continue to work with BC Housing, for instance. So this is a bit murky, and I take that point from council, but that's because we are a bit murky on it, and we're now coming to the stage where, as one judge rather unkindly said to me once, it's time to fish or cut bait, and we have to figure out what it is our priorities are going to be. And that will involve a part of the capital construction today as well. So, having blabbed on for a little while, Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship.
And Councillor Gessenbrock next, after Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. Also acknowledging this is a really murky subject, and I appreciate the contributions of staff. I think the framework is definitely something we can use. However, in terms of this conversation, I think we're going in circles a bit, and I don't want to get back to the place where we have a blank slate and people are throwing their advocacy ideas forward and what are we going to say and how are we going to do it. I think when an issue arises, we identify it as such, we name it, and we determine how we're going to deal with it. And for me, that's how advocacy works. So, for example, health and housing is the lens I'm kind of seeing everything through right now. So we have, I would say, some ongoing work that is happening with our partners, and that is that's been happening for a good while, and that's kind of an emergency. That's our current work. Then we have the long-term work with Dr. Turner, and that's kind of our long game plan of understanding how the system works and where the numbers are and how we can effectively communicate our story of health and housing in Nanaimo. What I think we're missing, and again, this is just some health and housing files, we're missing that intermediate piece whereby, because of COVID, we now have a government that is a bit more amenable and flexible to opening themselves up to having communities say, we're ready for A, B, C, and D. And here are our plans for, or here's the background of the conversations we've had in the community related to. So having said all that, if it is going to be about health and housing, I would recommend that the conversation not be kind of that like throwing darts at a dartboard and seeing what sticks, but actually give it to the Health and Housing Task Force to see what they come up with. And that may require an in-confidence briefing, I'm not sure. But I'm feeling a little bit that we could go in the direction of what do people think we should advocate for. And I don't think that's our purpose. I don't think that's a good strategy, because we could advocate for anything under the sun. But what are our clear issues right now? And I think health and housing presents a really unique opportunity. And further said, I've mentioned to the group before that there is some advocacy coming out of the Nanaimo Homeless Coalition to the federal government. I tried to get my hands on their actual ask, but I wasn't able to get it. I'm sure it'll be coming very shortly. But paying attention to what's coming and what's already happening from the Homeless Coalition and how we can tap into that, how we can align our messaging. That's the conversation I was hoping we could have today.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrock and then Councillor Brown, if I'm reading the little hand symbols correctly.
Thank you, Your Worship. Hello? Oh.
Yeah.
Sorry, my computer just cut out there. Thank you, Worship. So a few comments here. I've just been trying to make sense of the process that we're following here. In terms of the framework and the questions to ask to support council to come to an advocacy strategy on a particular topic, I think that this is a useful framework to help guide the discussion. I think that we're at a point that we need to have particular discussions on some particular topics, and so today is not the time to do that. I think that we should pick a time in short order to have those discussions, and obviously top of mind is our orientation and strategy around addressing homelessness. And addiction. I like on that particular topic, I like the recommendation of Councillor Hemmons. I would really like the Health and Housing Task Force to sit down with this framework and have the discussion. What are our intermediate asks at this stage of time where we're not quite completed the work of Turner? However, there is a moment here where we can have some cohesive asks around addressing homelessness and health. And from that discussion, recommendations to come to council where we have our discussion around our advocacy strategy so that we can all be on the same page with that. And I think that should happen quite soon to work through. And then separately, our discussion on capital projects. I think this is a great framework to work through a discussion with council to come to that when is the appropriate time to tease through that. And potentially, if we set a time, staff can sit down prior, going through the framework to provide suggestions to council that then we could workshop and go through specifically on capital projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to Councillor Brown, I'm going to go to Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Worship. So listening to Councillor Hemmons and then now Councillor Gesselbrock and the Councillor Brown before about process, having not had the topics totally nailed down, but basically knowing from your meeting on the 24th that the Health and Housing Task Force is the biggest kind of file that affects a lot of Nanaimo. I like Councillor Hemmons' idea of, if council's okay with this framework, just giving it to them to work on a strategy around advocacy for that file at the task force's table. And then if council's okay with that framework, it can be used for any number of topics. They just do need to be fleshed out. So, because each topic, the questions and answers are going to be slightly different. So it's hard to go through each topic, A, getting you all to decide on a topic, and then B, going through the framework for each topic and how that's going to work. I think it would be better to have staff come back, and or if you have some capital projects in the next item on the agenda, that could be, we could come back with that as well.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. I too was going to voice support for the sort of the process Councillor Hemmings articulated. I think that's important work for the task force for a couple of reasons. One is it has a lot of touch points with Island Health and BC Housing and other frontline service providers, and I think that's really important feedback for us to be effective advocates. Is basing it in a sort of a realistic actions for moving forward and trying to address. I think we're all aware of the issues, and there's a variety of responses that is going to be needed to sort of tackle this as a whole. There's no just one solution, and I think having that feedback and outlining some sort of key areas for us to advocate with would be effective, but it would also potentially be effective in having some alignment and advocacy across organizations. If there's some agreement there, it would be beneficial. And I think at the end of the day, it's important that we do try to ground this work in our existing plans, so whether it's the affordable housing strategy or the plan to end homelessness, which I assume will get a nice refresh or amendment and augmentation through Dr. Turner's work. It really gives us things to point to help alleviate this issue. And then the other item, and I think it would sort of flow into the next conversation, but I think we might be a little premature in that conversation, is just flagging that there is probably going to need to be a lot of COVID recovery advocacy. If there's things that we can do as a city and we can come together as a community and try to tackle this stuff, but there potentially will be the economic stimulus packages from the Fed or the province that we definitely want to make sure that we're biting into and getting the biggest piece possible for our community. And there's a lot of unknowns there right now, but I think we can see some of that conversation now, and potentially through the new mayor's task force or through the housing health and housing task force and even the ECDEV task force to start to flesh out where we can get what we're owed, but also again grounded in realistic plans and opportunities.
Thank you. Councillor Kesselbrock.
Thank you, Your Worship. A few comments here. One is with homelessness and addiction, I feel like council, when we're discussing our advocacy strategy, we're due for just a general policy discussion on what is council's official strategy and policy around addressing this issue. Like, we've done a lot of things with the Health and Housing Task Force, and we're currently working through a process to identify resources and a strategy. And I think a discussion's needed so we can piece in when Councillor Armstrong's talking about the judicial system, when Mr. Mayor, you're talking about the creation of institutions. When we speak to those things, how is that fitting into our overall policy orientation and strategy? And I think that these disparate pieces haven't been put together yet, so it is difficult to have something concise that we're messaging out on. And I think at this stage, because the data is not in from the Health and Housing Task Force, the discussion will be a little bit amorphous, but I think that we should begin on that just so that we can start placing the different pieces that we do here topped out quite often. Thank you.
Anyone else? So in terms of the framework, do I get the sense that the framework is working for people? Are we looking for something different? I see a thumb up from Councillor Brown, which is a thumb up from Councillor Thorpe, a thumb up from Councillor Hemmings, thumb up from Councillor Bonner, Gesselbrock. All these thumbs up, I feel like it's a TV show. If we're generally agreed that the framework is working, then I'm going to suggest before we get into the capital project discussion, we take a 15-minute break, and then we'll come back to finish this topic in the sense that we just understand I'm not closing off item G, but I think it's worth talking about item H around the capital projects, and then perhaps we'll have a better feel for the advocacy approach. As I say, I mean, there's the asking for things that we don't have control over, but we certainly have on our plates, and there's asking for things that where we can hope to get substantial contribution to help our economy and build our community generally. So we'll reconvene at 1:36. After consideration, the wise advice of Ms. Curry, perhaps a motion to adopt the advocacy framework would be appropriate now, and then we can carry on with the potential capital discussion, given the number of thumbs up that I spotted earlier.
I'll move it.
So moved by Councillor Markman. Who's a seconder? Councillor Brown. Any discussion? Councillor Brown?
Yes, thank you, Worship. I'm happy to support the strategy. I'm still, and I apologize if it's just me, but I'm not clear on what's happening moving forward. And the reason I bring this up is because I think there needs to be a realization that this has been a conversation piece for over a year, and other than the strategy, we're not anywhere further. So I just need some confidence in what's happening moving forward. I get the capital project, and that's quite an emergent thing and an important conversation. I look forward to that. But just around, especially around this health and housing, it is our biggest issue. There's stuff we could be doing, but I'm not understanding what we're doing to take it to the next level.
Ms. Curry.
Thank you, Worship, and through you to Councillor Brown. So with the framework adopted, it will not be unlike what I believe Councillor Hammond said, where you have this framework, you identify a topic, and then using that framework, we're gonna do it. Or staff can bring you the framework outlined on a topic that's arisen, and then Councillor can move forward with that plan and that strategy based on the framework. So having the framework in place, it can go to health and housing for advocacy strategy around that, and health and housing can use that framework and develop that strategy and the who's and the what's and flush it all out there. And staff have that tool to bring forward to council and say, okay, here's the framework that we've developed on this topic that council's identified, and here's all the fleshed out parts to it, and what might be included in that is not just the advocacy framework, but also a business plan if it's like a capital project. If it's not a topic, it's a project, there'll be more facets to it, not just the framework for advocacy, but also the business plan, the budget components, etc. So this framework is just one tool for staff to use to bring to council when council's identified a topic, and then that way council's ready to go, as one of you had said. Just having that topic identified, and then you're ready to go, whether it's advocacy or whatever the matter might be. Does that make a little bit of sense?
Councillor Brown again, before I go to Councillor Armstrong.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Ms. Curry. That makes sense. So I would just a follow-up question then is, do we need a subsequent motion to send this to the Health and Housing Task Force to sort of move it along?
Yes, please, yes.
Yes.
Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you.
Shall we vote on that first?
Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, I understand that, but I've also got some concerns around that, because I know from the Health and Housing Task Force stuff I've been reading, a lot of it's focused around addictions and mental health. We also have a lot of homeless people that don't fall into that category, and I think we're forgetting about them, and the governments are forgetting about them, and I think that we could potentially have more after this COVID's done. So we also have to include that, I believe, in our advocacy, because nobody's doing that right now. And I've been looking at all the different cities, what they're doing. It's all about mental health and addiction, which I agree is a very big one. But I also think we have to do some advocacy for those people that are working 3 jobs or have lost their jobs and have lost homes. Where are they going to go? So I think that needs to be included in that if it goes to health and housing. That, from my perspective, that's another area we need to look at. Thank you.
Point of order, we're voting on that.
We will be. Councillor Gesselbrock?
Just some clarity on process. So we send this advocacy discussion to the Health and Housing Task Force. They're going to have it. It'll come back to council. That framework will be filled out in terms of what the Health and Housing Task Force thinks that council should be advocating for around homelessness and addiction. Then we'll sit down with it, have a discussion around it, maybe add a few things, take a few things out, and then we will vote on that, and that'll be council's official position in terms of what we're advocating for health and housing, addiction, until we look at it again. Am I correct?
Nicely summarized, Councillor Gesselbrock. So, if there's no further discussion on what might be the potential second motion, then I'll call for the vote on the motion, which is to endorse the advocacy framework.
Yeah.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
Now there'd be a motion.
Councillor.
I'll move that it goes to Health and Housing Task Force.
Councillor Himmons and then Councillor Brown.
I think one of them is seconded.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I may, I'll second and speak to it.
Thank you.
I say this needs to go to the subgroup of the Health and Housing Task Force, the same group that is working closely with Dr. Turner. It has the right representatives on it. If it goes directly to the Health and Housing Task Force in its entirety, it won't have the right partners at the table, I don't think. So if we could just amend to send it to the subgroup that's working with Dr. Turner.
Sure.
Are the mover and the seconder agreeable? Councillor Markman is indicating yes. Councillor Himmons, obviously. All right, so the motion is it goes to the subgroup. Are we clear on that? Let me throw out something that I thought was rather interesting, given Councillor Armstrong's remarks at the start of this discussion, that, and I won't say who, said to me after a bit of a discussion around these issues, said, you look after me, meaning me, you look after the 15%, because I often say the 5, 10, 15% of the homeless population who have severe mental health and addiction issues are the ones that arguably I'm more concerned about in terms of the cost and the necessity of dealing with those who I see as the most vulnerable. She said, you look after the 15% and I'll look after the 85%. And I think we should keep in mind that as we're having this discussion, and I know the task force is aware of it, there are 518 units of housing in this community that are either being constructed as we speak or in the planning stages, whether it's Buttertubs or the units finishing on Rosehill or Brecken. So there is work being done, notwithstanding the concerns that Councillor Armstrong very legitimately raises. We are focused very much on a portion of the population, but also, and I think we're all conscious of it, the numbers of people who are literally a paycheck away from homelessness or a pension check or a rent eviction or whatever the case may be, or a divorce or separation, all of those things that contribute to homelessness in our community. And I trust the task force and its subgroup to be able to work through this. Mr. Rudolph.
Your Worship, just a point of clarification on the subgroup. So the subgroup, I understand, to be sub to the task force. So in terms of recommendations, the recommendations would be funneled through the task force and then to council, which is the body that was set up by council. That's the way, from a governance point of view, it would have to work, though this group may have, and I'm not sure, I personally understand who's on the sub-working group, but the task force was a select group that wanted a balanced set of inputs from a bunch of stakeholders. So am I correct on that? Is that the way this would work? Because I believe it's probably the way it should work.
That's my...
That's Ms. Curry's understanding, and Councillor Himmons is put her hand up, and Councillor Brown had a thumbs up behind her. So we'll go to Councillor Himmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to clarify, the subgroup was set up of kind of local stakeholders that were going to work directly with Dr. Turner on kind of getting early sets of data and kind of chewing on those bigger questions. It doesn't include BC Housing, Island Health, or Service Canada. And from my perspective, those are three partners we don't need at the table to determine our interim advocacy strategy. In fact, it might actually be a bit conflicted, I'm not sure. Because the advocacy would primarily be going to BC Housing, so I'm not sure what to do about it. But the subgroup is, in my opinion, the people that need to be at the table to determine the best course of action.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Worship. I would just highlight that obviously that we have to follow the governance structure as it is, and if a particular task force member, just like any of our committee or task force representatives, felt that there was conflict of interest there between, they would obviously remove themselves from that portion of the discussion, which should happen anyways to alleviate concerns around conflict or putting people in an awkward position.
Thank you. Anyone further? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, everyone. The next is a potential capital project discussion. Mr. Riddell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe this topic, and I think members of council identified this as potential to align nicely with the previous conversation around advocacy. In fact, it was the genesis of this report coming forward today was based on an ask by the local MP for a list of topics or projects or whatever, he didn't really specify, that he could advocate on your behalf for in Ottawa. So that's sort of one side of it. The second side of this equation is this is a conversation that staff, I believe we've had bits and pieces of conversation with council before, certainly through budget process, on some of our more significant capital issues in the city. And so one of the outcomes of this conversation is, from a staffing point of view, would be to hopefully get some direction from council to go away and do a little more work on some of these projects that you feel are particularly important, and that we would come back with those business cases and briefing notes that should you agree with them as priorities, then we would supply that type of information to the MP or anybody else for that matter. I think council is aware that the COVID pandemic is anticipating that government will be looking for opportunities to invest strategically in communities, such as Nanaimo, hopefully, and that if we were shovel-ready with some of these, a large number of these projects, that we would be able to hopefully position those for candidacy for grants or that type of thing. It would depend on the criteria that the government has for those grants. Might be green, might be local employment, might be a variety of factors that would lead to that. So and we had a very brief conversation with council last Monday at council on the idea of bringing forward something like this for this week. We apologize for the brevity of the materials in front of you, but it was really hastily put together as a starting point for conversation. And so what you have is a chart that lists a number of significant capital projects by general category. And we do have several of our senior management team here today to speak to any of those projects. And I might actually invite them each to kind of talk to their area so that they can explain what the issue is. So we would like to briefly run through this list for you, answer any questions you might have, and then circle back with hopefully getting some consensus or direction from council on next steps with any or all of these projects. So if I could just introduce the first section, and it's on page 6 of your report. It's the one with the colored chart, where it has a list of projects listed. And the color coding only means it made it easier to read. We just broke it up. And the first group of projects are projects that are not currently in our funding capital plan, for the most part. And these are projects that would either require debt, a partnership, or some extraordinary funding arrangements that would allow us to move them forward. Either assent from the residents of the community, a referendum, or that type of thing. And most of these projects have been mentioned to council before, but we wanted to just run through them with you again and just give you a bit of a sense on that. And I could certainly do justice to a little bit of it, but I would ask each of the general managers or the superintendent to speak to their particular issue and just flesh it out without getting into a big presentation, if that's acceptable to you. So on the first issue, in the waterfront walkway, Mr. Lindsay is out at another meeting right now. He wasn't able to be here for this part of the meeting, and he may be back in time to talk about this. But as council is aware, the waterfront walkway is something that had extensive previous work done on it in terms of public engagement, and staff have been sent away to do more recent updates. And we're going to be in a position to brief council in an open meeting in the not too distant future on the status of that project. It would be something that could fall easily into the category as technically shovel-ready. It would be a whole bunch of other issues attached to that, but that's something that if there was an interest to have that briefing paper presented to you at an open council meeting, we could certainly advance that. And I'm sure you're well aware of that. The South End Community Center is a project that's been in the Parks and Rec and Culture Master Plan dating back some 10 to 15 years. It's the last large capital recreation project not addressed to date in the Parks, Rec and Culture Master Plan. Now it's going to be refreshed. Mr. Harding is here. He can speak a little bit about the background to that. Maybe, do you want to kind of do it that way as we walk through so that you get a flavor of this? And he will also speak to the other sports and recreational projects on the list. So just a bit of an update on that project, Richard.
Unless I hear strong objections, we're doing well time-wise today, considering a scheduled 4-hour meeting, and we're going to proceed, as I say, unless I see a bunch of thumbs down, and I don't. So, Mr. Harding, thank you.
Thank you, Worship. So we'll mention a number, right, Sheila?
Yeah, just about that way, just so the mayor doesn't have to crank his head.
Okay.
You just, yeah.
On our March 6th GPC, we did and we'll probably reference it that meeting a few times when I get to speak. We did the long GPC on overall facility issues. One of the ones we definitely have seen and we haven't addressed, as Mr. Rudolph has mentioned, is some South End recreational opportunities. The Chase River Neighborhood Association is ready to keep working on concepts and options. So the idea is, we're not sure what size or scope it'll be, but for planning purposes, we're using basically the idea of an Oliver Woods South. So that's kind of where we see Oliver Woods is very successful, very busy. It's those types of facilities that we see a desire throughout the community, but particularly we've got a lot of demand in the South End. So, but it could also include some other aspects, working with some of the other groups in that area for childcare, health issues, other things like that. So it's really getting that planning part that I'm going to.
So Your Worship is an example of a project that you can conceptualize as council has an appetite for, not to say we haven't funded, just to advance it to some sort of a functional design so we have an idea of what we're talking about, where it might be located. That's the type of thing that we could advance now for planning purposes. And then once we get, and there would have to be a more detailed process with the community and all that type of thing, but we could move that dial down the path further. So that's just an example. And so maybe at the end of today, you can come back to these projects and have your conversation. That's what I would suggest. I'm just trying to expedite the process because there's a lot of things on this list. The RCMP facility, I think the superintendent and Ms. Lakin can both speak to this as to what the issue is and what so the superintendent is here, and just to give you sort of that current read on that, and so there we go.
You want me to kick off and you cooperate? Okay.
Actually, yeah, I think you actually.
I actually can, if you wouldn't mind standing where Richard was with
That's where the cameras are.
the web camera.
Okay, we'll tag team this. We've had numerous conversations since the beginning of the year when I started. This is a persistent issue. The RCMP detachment in Nanaimo is at least 50% underbuilt. It is significantly underserving the complement of both municipal employees and members of the RCMP in that particular building. It is exacerbated and compounded by the current COVID situation, where we're going to have great difficulty in staffing back into regular hours, particularly with some of the staffing changes with plain clothes versus boots on the ground, so to speak, moving forward with the aspect of physical distancing. So that is just COVID has just compounded it. It's been persistent for a long time. There's tremendous opportunity to look at a new facility and repurposing the current detachment for additional federal level positions for economic development within the city. General Manager Lindsay and I have had conversations with CAO and others at the senior table on that possibility, and I think that that would take some longer term planning, but to move forward to a conceptual design with both serving the members and the municipal employees for policing in our city is very key. as well as a tremendous opportunity to impact economic development with some vacant land close by and potentially looking at that whole neighborhood and that design. Turn over to you, Catherine.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ligon. Your Worship, as Ms. Ligon said, I mean, the building was built in '87 for about half the size that she built on. Considering there would be 15 new officers over the next 5 years, additional support staff as well. And the building that we're in now cannot be built up. So the way it was designed is not structurally sound enough to build up. A number of council members have taken you on tours there, and you've seen the overcrowding that Ms. Ligon mentioned. I believe that if we were to look at creating a new RCMP detachment at this time, it would realistically be 7 years out before we did that. And if we waited now, waited 7 years to do that, that would put us 14 years out. And by that time, we're going to be in a real jackpot. So I'm thinking if one of the things are for funding for this, something we want to consider to get ahead of the curve. And when I say ahead of the curve, that's the curve that we're already behind. So I think we look going forward to start this now, we'll be ahead in a position in 7 or 8 years to have this building built with potential revenue from federal sections and RCMP sections, because there is a shortage of secure office space in this town. And the federal sections that rent 575 Fitzwilliam need what we call the DSO, Departmental Security Office, secured platform. And our buildings are built to that SCIF level, which means we can have our internal communications. So there is a potential revenue stream in there. Worship, happy to take any questions you may have.
Councillor Bonner, then Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Worship, and through you to Superintendent Miller. I'm kind of asking the questions here a whole bunch, and feel free to just say yes, no, or maybe. In a new building, could it be feasible to build it in conjunction with a number of other facilities? For example, the ambulance folks?
So your Worship, to Councillor Bonner, yes, that's possible. I've seen a number of places where they built campuses, where they have police, fire, and ambulance together. Therefore, you have one set of training rooms, one set of gyms, one set of shower, locker facilities. So your footprint is a lot smaller for all three combined than it would be for 3 standalones. That is possible.
And my other question is, I'm thinking of partnerships with the retail industry and or construction builders. Is it possible, as long as the entrances are completely separated, security's all set up and stuff like that, to have additional residential, say, on the top stories? So as long as elevators are separated, parking, all that sort of stuff, do you think that could be feasible as well?
Your Worship, to Councillor Bonner, I've never seen that done before. I do know that in some areas that they do have other tenants, that there are police stations that are attached to retail malls. I've never seen anything where residential was attached as part of the thing. I would have to look into that and get back to you, Your Worship.
I would be interested in that specifically. I think that there's, if we were to offer, and I'm not suggesting this is part of a negotiation or anything, but I've seen other places where this type of product was offered to construction companies who then were able to recoup some of the cost of building the police station by reselling residential properties, or that as an example, sort of thing.
And I think Your Worship, Ms. Ligon, would like to comment.
Ms. Ligon.
If I may, through Your Worship, to Councillor Bonner. I have asked this question several times with a lot of folks looking at this opportunity, and inevitably I hear that it's not feasible because of the siren testing on a regular basis and that they are not preferred locations for housing. And that's my understanding, particularly when we looked at a temporary location to expand the footprint of detachment. Is we have to be very cognizant that even though, from my perspective, policing services in your backyard could be a positive for the surrounding residents, apparently it is not popular in that the daily alarms and other testing that you do is quite disruptive. It's what I understand.
Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong and then Councillor Brown.
One of my questions would be directed to Ms. Wade and the other one to Superintendent. It is, with the COVID thing, I've been seeing a lot of research where it says we're probably going to go back to the cubicles, which we went away from, but we're going back now. Would Canada Labor Code come into play with that if that's not done? And for Ms. Lagan, would WorkSafe come into play on that?
Do you want me to answer? Sure. So, through your worship, to Councillor Armstrong, we're investigating right now what a back to work scenario looks like. We don't have all the answers at this point. We've taken significant measures within the detachment already with respect to splitting up teams so that if there was an issue, we would have at least 50%, because every single individual working both on the ME and the detachment side is a critical resource, and we are also backfilling in every case. We have put a significant amount of plexiglass up. So we're investigating it at this point. We don't have a definitive answer. We are looking at surrounding buildings and looking for an expansion with respect to more space and footprint, and we're trying to accelerate that at this point, possibly in the next 60 days.
Thank you.
And Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to whoever can answer this question, and it may be a silly question. I'm just curious, is that the idea? If you were to do a planning exercise today to site a building, would that be considered the ideal place to site the building?
Your Worship, to Councillor Brown, so the ideal place to get a building is where it can be built feasibly at the best price. That said, it's always an idea, and a positive idea, to have your police station in the downtown core, because that's where you have the bulk of your people. You also want to have them close to where your problem areas are, but your problem areas will shift over time. Your downtown core generally remains the downtown core at all times, which is why in most metropolitan urban centers, you see the police station in the downtown area. So the area that we've tossed out first, that's been one proposed idea, is right across the road from where we are now. I can let Ms. Legan build on that maybe.
Sure. So, through your worship, Councillor Brown, one of the proposed sites in discussions with planning here at the city and with the CAO and others is across the street. It's a vacant site. We have to look at access because we have 24-hour traffic in and out. We have the cell block, which has to be properly designed. We have some significant information technology hardening of this particular building, and we also have significant parking issues right now, both with the fire station, with 575 Fitzwilliams, where there's some federal level organizations, then the vacant space beside, and over at detachment. So there is actually a high level conceptual concept. There's a high level concept out there that actually with both Chief Fry and with Mr. Lindsay and Mr. Rudolph and Superintendent Miller aligned around, it could work really well to expand temporarily where there is some vacant space in that neighborhood immediately, so it's literally a walk across the street. And in the process of building Fire Hall 1 rebuild, we would actually be able to do a domino effect of moving people through hardened buildings already from an IT perspective, potentially build next to the 575 Fitzwilliams, which is past its useful life. It would be a tear down, and that could be a secure parking as well, so we could address multiple issues. So there is the traffic in and out, there's a cell block, there's hardened IT infrastructure for this whole neighborhood, and that's what we're looking at right now.
Thank you. And if I just may ask a follow-up to Superintendent Miller, is it typical to just have one station, or do they sometimes get divided and you have, similar to fire halls where you have a couple locations throughout the area served?
So, Your Worship, to Councillor Brown, we do have a sub-office up at Oliver Woods right now, and we would maintain that one just so we have, that's part of our business continuity plan in case the main detachment goes down. But if you look at my friend and colleague Adam Palmer, the Chief of Vancouver Police, they have one main police station. They do have a sub-office, but generally you're going to run with one main station because you want one main cell block, and that assists with transportation to and from with sheriff's services, ports, and whatnot.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Rudolph, then Councillor
So, Your
Bonner.
Worship, this was not an attempt to go through one or two scenarios for each of these projects. This is just to identify that we'd like to come back to you with a layout of opportunities. And this is not in our financial plan. And unfortunately, this has been in the works discussions since over 10 years. So it's just found ways to be delayed, and it needs to get resolved. And we're just bringing it forward to you as an item that exists, and it's not insignificant financially, and it's not insignificant in terms of the number of people in the need. So we just wanted to get it there, and if council is of a mind to ask us for more detailed business cases around this, which I think makes sense, then we could sort through that and look at the options that are available and the fiscal implications for it.
I'm going to go to Councillor Bonner, and then I'm going to suggest, as Mr. Rudolph has very subtly suggested, we move on to the next topic because we have a long list. Councillor Bonner?
I'll pass based on that. I can ask a question anytime.
But Your Worship, back to this is if council at the end of this, if you would like us to come back with more fulsome reports on each of these or any of these topics, that's the kind of direction we'd like to receive from you today. The next item, Your Worship, is the Public Works Facility, and it's equally as interesting in terms of the age and condition of the complex that it exists, and it's unfortunately equally large in its potential cost, capital cost to the city. So, and again, this is one of these things that's long overdue for a conversation with council.
Mr. Sims.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't really have much to add to what Mr. Rudolph said. It's a complicated site to deal with. The initial premise that we're working on is that we would combine the engineering group, who's here in the Service Resource Center, and the Parks Operations group, as well as a bunch of park support facilities, all onto the Public Works campus. It ties in with a little bit with the Fire Training Center as well. We've done some space planning, and we've done some very, very preliminary costing, which we wouldn't want to bring forward because those numbers tend to stick in people's minds, and this is not the time to do that. So we're going to continue with the space planning and sort of needs assessment, and we'll probably end up coming back to council as soon as we can. But if I could speak a little bit to the Fire Training Center.
I was going to do that. Go ahead. Are you speaking for Karen?
Yeah, just a little bit of history on that, if it's helpful.
I think you have a conflict of interest on that.
Okay.
Because he wants that site.
That's what I was saying.
Not to be kind of unfair. Unfortunately, the fire chief was here, and she's laughed, I suspect, because there's something with work. But she has two items that I asked her to put on this list. One is the fire hall number 2, well, not fire hall number 2, but attached to the public works yard, which is large. This is a location for the training center, which has fires and smoke and so forth, which is kind of inappropriate for moving forward, and it'd be better to have it in a more rural, remote location for that. So there's potential for that to be repurposed and incorporate, being a bit facetious, into the public works family of buildings. And I think Mr. Sims understated the potential to do work there in an incremental fashion. He has a fleet center that doesn't meet seismic standards, doesn't meet all the aspirations in the brief. So I think that's a project that could easily be phased. And again, that would be something that I would recommend we be authorized to come back with a more detailed report to you on how to make that incrementally work. So there is an interest, though, on that site plan that I've seen, which has that fire tower in it. The second piece is just to let you know that the fire department is starting a fire response update plan for their service this year, and that's an operational plan, but that will inform a future fire hall location or recommendations. Because we are, I think most of the council would know that there's been on the books for some time another fire hall contemplated, and even a site acquired for that purpose. So not that that's in the immediate horizon, but it's something presumably in the 10-year window of capital projects. So we wanted to alert you to the fact that that's another project that will be coming along, and at some point in time there needs to be a conversation with council about how to move that project along. No, it wouldn't be as urgent currently as these other projects that have been noted, like the RCMP and the Public Works and some of those projects. So, and Ms. Fry could have been here, but she had to leave, I guess, so I just wanted to get it on the list so you're aware of that. And that study will be produced this year, and it will identify amongst a whole bunch of operational things, tentative proposed locations from an area service time point of view where to put a fire hall for the future growth of the city. And those, for the most part, Your Worship, are the group of projects that would fit into the subject of need debt. And we're not even talking 10 years out, the dam upgrade and the water upgrade to which is beyond that. So fashioning a strategy, fiscal strategy to deal with these types of projects, let alone the other ones on this list, is something that would have to be, would certainly need strong leadership from our finance and corporate services folks to help us determine some fiscal options forward, and maybe look for those partnerships. I know Chief Fry has indicated explicitly an interest in a residential combination with the fire hall, because there's now numerous examples out there in different cities with that, so she's not at all opposed to that, and if it actually helped to fast track a fire hall, she would see that as not a compromised problem. So she's actually been to see some of those halls in the Lower Mainland where they've started to produce those. So maybe a deal with BC Housing or something could be created that would actually have a funding partner at the table with us.
It's an interesting prospect, but I think I'd have to be pretty desperate for housing myself to be prepared to live above a fire station.
So Your Worship, if you want us just to kind of work our way through the rest of the list, and then you can circle back to have a conversation. So the next, I'm going to ask Mr. Harding to come forward and speak to the next group, the sports and cultural investments, and take it from there.
So again, remember back March 6th, we actually gave you a 2 or 3 page list of all the different community projects that are out there. Here we tried to put in some that we know there could be partnerships or things that again could be shelf ready or relatively in that time frame. And again, they're examples. So Port Theatre, of course, we talked about a lot. Didn't get its, we didn't get the grant, but again, it's a very closely to be done or to be shovel ready. Stadium improvements, again, coming back, we need to decide where to invest in one of the stadiums, be it Caledonia or be it NDSS, and we'll bring that report still back to council for discussion, but it's an opportunity to do those investments and make one of those areas. Harewood Field, we know the school board, and we would like to have a 4th artificial turf field, so there's opportunities for partnerships with other groups or organizations. It's a project that we know we can design it relatively quickly, get it going relatively quickly. We know there's a demand for it. One of those things. Curling club renewal, again, back in March 6th, we explained to you the condition issues with the curling club. Definitely something that would need to be worked on and designed, but we do have some condition assessment work already done. Again, it's a partnership opportunity with the club. The Nama Art Gallery expansion improvements. Remember, we're coming back as staff with a review of the agreement with the art gallery, but also looking at where they're going to go with their next phases. So those are some quick ones. Again, I'm going through those very quickly. And again, they're just a number of examples. Your Worship.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Harding, I just have a question on the artificial fields here at Centennial and why there's a check mark under environmental. Is that because you don't have to cut the grass, or is it, I'm having trouble determining why that would be environmental?
Yeah, it's actually us working with engineering department. They've identified, and then the planning department, they've identified a need for some stormwater management and detention in that area, given all the development. So if we did something, we would work with them at the same time to create some type of stormwater detention, which could be an environmental enhancement feature.
Okay, never thought of that part. Thanks.
Yeah.
Any further, Councillor Martin?
Just through your worship, I'm not sure who can answer this question, but in previous conversations, somebody mentioned that 575 Fitzwilliam will most likely have to be a tear down. I'm just wondering, does it have to be a tear down, or is there any way it could be restructured into an arts community center? or something else, repurposed.
Ms. Legan?
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Martman. There is no decision taken on 575 Fitzwilliams. It is a building that is aged, and it currently is configured for dark web, like very, very hardened from an IT perspective. That's probably its number one attribute. After that, not so much, if you've toured it. It's also an absolutely ideal location for a potential parkade. I would look to the planning department of the city under Mr. Lindsay for potential buildings to be repurposed. From my, sort of cursory perspective, it wouldn't be ideal for that type of use, and it may have a higher and better use at this point as a tear down for a secure parkade, which could free up some more space somewhere else. So I think it's a domino effect, and there is no decisions taken at this point whatsoever on any of these buildings.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate the sentiment. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any further questions on this section?
Councillor Bonner.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship, and if I may ask a question, not sure to who, probably Richard, Mr. Harding. In the list that we have in front of us, I'm guessing these are just city-owned facilities, and I'm wondering if we're reaching out to the community for more of these examples. Specifically, I know that the Loudon Boathouse is pretty well in the final stages of actually getting a plan up already, so that it's shovel ready. And there's also the International People's Place of Culture, which I've been told could receive almost 100% funding. Are we looking at those types of partnerships and other projects around as well?
Yeah, Your Worship, Councillor Bonner and Mr. Rudolph may add in also. These are just some quick examples. Again, if we go back to that March 6th overall list, we actually mentioned all those buildings you just mentioned, Councillor Bonner. So, and then we also did some example scope sheets later on. Like we talked about the sports zone. And in the sports zone, there'd be a number of areas that would may not be on property, it could be the school board or working with BIU. But the Loudon Boathouse, for example, will be a city building. And if it's any building actually built on parkland, dedicated parkland, will be a city building also. So even if any of the lease improvement projects go forward at Bevan Park, it'd still be a city building because of the dedication of the parkland. But those are a number of examples in there.
Anyone else on this section? Thank you very much. Mr. Rudolph?
Your Worship, the next section is, unless you want to jump to the other part with Mr. Harding, which is improvements to facilities, but if you want to deal with his suite of things totally, we can do that and just get Richard to speak to some of those other projects, and then we can conclude with Mr. Sims's presentation on some of those major infrastructure projects.
Your Worship, so these again are now some examples of some projects that are in the capital budget now, or mostly are in the capital budget now. Wendy will correct me in a second, I'm sure. But at least being worked on again. They're not huge dollar account amounts, although some of them are in there. But it's really just examples again where we can either package something together for a variety of amenities. So the Bevan electrical upgrade, that's designs underway now with work to be done in 2021. So Roxton Stadium improvements, we do have the improvement plan completed. We still need to bring it forward with final details for council's approval. Lights are going in now. There's a number of projects with that improvement of that stadium we could add in and have done relatively quickly. Another report we want to bring forward to council in the next month or so is replacement of the 4th theater windows. There's a Shaw Auditorium work that also was done, and Ms. Leggett can talk to that one. Neck point, then it's the small ones. Neck point washrooms, we're doing the design for those right now. Seabolt stairs, the design is done, and we want to proceed with that this year. Water pool features, again, we just picked a variety of different types of amenities that could add improvements to a variety of facilities. This would be for NAC, the National Aquatic Center. It's also in the design stage this year with hopefully the new features to go in next year, and we could also add some more features at Bevan Park. And then council approved for us to do a study looking at geothermal, particularly at Nick and Knack. That study's underway now. There could be some opportunities to, particularly if granting comes out that is environmentally focused or greenhouse gas reduction, that would be a project we could look at. So again, a variety of examples.
Questions for Mr. Harding?
So,
Seeing none, thank you very much. Back to Mr. Sims.
Thank you, Your Worship. These are a number of projects that check a number of the boxes that within Council's strategic plan, but are also in various stages of readiness for construction. So Metro Drive, Council is quite familiar with, and we should be starting construction.
can you give some social distancing?
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you for the reminder. Sorry to...
Don't take it personally. Don't take it personally.
Get you in trouble again for social distancing.
Oh, boy. So the Metro Drive Complete Street, the phase 2 will be hopefully tendered next year. It's an extensive, expensive project, but it would be an attractive one for senior government funding as well, because that would help offset some of the general capital taxation or funding for that. So the next one, we called it, we're sort of rebranding a few of our projects. So the next one is an example of that is the Bowen Park Bikeway and Sewer. In actual fact, the project in the budget is a DCC sewer project that you approved the borrowing, short-term borrowing on. It's a major sewer capacity upgrade that supports growth, but it's also a really good opportunity for an upgrade to the pathway through Bowen Park. So improved lighting, a bit better additional width, and that's much more attractive, we feel, to the community than upgrading a sewer. So the driver of the project is certainly the sewer. The next one is another rebranding rather than Boxwood Connector, which seems to be an engineering term that we've carried from the first concept. We're looking at something like the Mid-City Gateway, because this project is really a gateway economically and physically and environmentally to the center of the city. So it's hope you can appreciate the beauty of the term, Your Worship. The next one,
It's got me excited, Mr. Sims.
The next one is One Port Drive, secondary access. It's currently funded as a level crossing later in the plan. There's a potential for, can you confirm that? It is.
Yeah, you have the secondary access in the plan.
Yeah, it's in the plan, but the opportunity is to put an elevated crossing there or to do some additional work with Southern Rail to consolidate their yard. This is a huge driver for the South Downtown waterfront lands. The North End water supply main is a parallel water main to Bowen Road. This is currently in the plan, and we'd just like to accelerate it, especially in light of the recent water main break on Bowen Road. This will allow the North End to be serviced with a full capacity main, and will allow us to rehabilitate the water main on Bowen Road. Towers Reservoir is due to proceed quite shortly. That's a high elevation reservoir in College Heights. Terminal Nickel Reimagined is another project that Council's fairly familiar with, I feel. It's the essentially Terminal Avenue south of Comox. It's an opportunity for improved surface features in partnership with the Ministry of Transportation. And last one is the opportunity to accelerate DCC sewer projects. We're running into this bind where our DCC pot cannot be replenished fast enough to keep up with the growth that those sewer projects are serving. As a result, we're seeing some developments sort of tipping us over the edge as far as sewer capacity is concerned. So if we can reach out and grab some funding to accelerate that, that'll help drive a little bit of economic growth as well. Be happy to take any questions.
Councillor Martin and Councillor Brown.
So if I may, through you, Your Worship, does that mean we really should be charging more for DCC fees? If they're not covering?
I think it's an excellent question. I think it was the spacing in the reviews. So the earlier review was done 2008, I think, and it wasn't didn't see the growth that we've experienced in the interim. So we didn't catch it soon enough. And so we have increased our sanitary sewer DCCs, but we're playing catch up essentially.
Okay.
We'll be able to fund all the projects eventually.
Okay. Thank you.
If that makes sense.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have two questions, one specifically for Mr. Sims and then one more general. For Mr. Sims, I'm just curious as to why the Wakeside corridor didn't make the list. And then my second more general question is, what was the criteria or the lens on which these projects were selected?
Which was what was
Criteria.
Criteria.
The first question was?
Wakeside.
Rise Wakeside.
Wakeside. Good question. Thanks to Councillor Brown. The Wakeside was a little bit later in the plan, so these were ones that were within striking distance within 2 or 3 years in capital, so closer to the term shovel ready. And in general, the criteria followed along which best check the boxes, to use that term, council strategic plan, which ones were available for partnership, and also which ones we felt were likely to attract the attention or approval of senior government funding.
Councillor Brown?
Yeah, just a quick follow-up on the Wakeside. Was the 50% detailed design completed this year as per the project page?
Yes, you could be right, actually. Yes, you could be right. Yeah. I'm not...
Thanks.
Anyone else? Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think this is through to Mr. Sims, through you if I may. It's quite possible that in the future, after we're coming out of this COVID, and the federal government, or possibly the provincial government, may be looking to items of infrastructure that are similar to what some other countries may be doing. And that is, I'm seeing other countries putting a lot of money into more biking infrastructure and active transportation infrastructure, with the idea that they've seen what the streets look like when there's not a lot of cars on them, and trying to push that through. Are we in a position as a city to quickly take up some of these offers that may or may not come down the line? I'm not sure if they are or not, but it would be certainly if they are that we would be in a position to be able to jump on the bandwagon, so to speak.
If I understand the question, do we have projects that line up with more active transportation? Is that what the question is?
Well, not really. Well, do we have the potential in the event that some funding becomes available from the federal government on more active transportation, with the idea that coming out of COVID, pushing that more than vehicle traffic? Are we able to quickly change some of these projects over to what might become available? And is that something that we're looking at?
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Bonner, I think a number of the projects do check that box. I think we'll be informed by our active transportation plan, which is underway. So for instance, some of the projects that we already have here, Waterfront Walkway, Metro, and the Boxwood Connector, as well as Terminal Nickel Reimagined, are some of the ones that would support active transportation. So if there's others that are, I think of the Indian Trail south of downtown is, there's a desire to have that one proceed, but that's an extensive and expensive one. We've done some preliminary work on that, but it's not feasible to fund at this point. So that might be an example of what you're looking at.
Anyone else? Mr. Rudolph?
So, Your Worship, just globally speaking, there's always an opportunity to spend more time looking at our capital projects corporately with council to reprioritize the timing. I think it does our best to find out funding windows and so forth. So some moving projects around is often a result of the availability of funding. And there's multiple funding sources for many of these projects. But making sure that priority list is aligning with council's priority list as well. In terms of, I was thinking of Wakasaya, and there were conversations, and it becomes somewhat fiscal. It also becomes what's anticipated to be coming along in terms of development in that corridor, which might help facilitate that development. In the case in front of the university is one area where there's more conversations would be needed to be happening. So there's sort of a couple of themes here. One is there's some things here that I think we could make shovel ready in terms of with proper briefing notes, as an example, a very shortened version of that attached to this. It gives a very elevator conversation level explanation of that project, and we could certainly build on some of these more critical ones in a deeper fashion. And that goes back to the first part of this list, which is really seeking a mandate from council to come back to you with more detailed reports, business cases on some of those larger projects which are not funded, and at least identify the scope of those, potential path forward for those. And then some of these other projects is just getting ourselves to a place where should government grants come along through COVID or other activities, we would be able to be responding as quickly as possible to those opportunities. So just seeking a little bit of comfort from council and direction, to be honest, in terms of what I've mentioned.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. One thing that I would like to see is I think that there could be some consequences, whether it be under WorkSafe Can or Labor Code or whatever, where these projects may have to take priority, because if we don't do it, we're going to be forced to do it. So I think when we're looking at those types of things, I would like to know, is there a public safety body that would have a say in it? I think that's important. Like when you're looking at Toronto, I was looking at Toronto, what they're saying now is that they're going to have a mandate, apparently, not whether it goes through or not, that all workspaces now have to be surrounded by 3 sides of a cubicle. And that'll come down to a WorkSafe thing if we don't do it. It's all through the same thing here. So I think that's something we have to really look at, because, by all accounts, COVID's not going away until there's a vaccine, which could be a couple years out. So I think we'd be remiss if we didn't look at things through that lens, that, what are the consequences if we don't do these bills. As much as I'd like to see the South Rec Centre go, because I think it's important. Right now, there's a lot of those centres not being used because of COVID, and we don't know how the outlook will be for future on them. So I think we have to really look at those buildings that are a necessity, such as public works and stations. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe, and then Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. I really appreciated getting the list, and I always enjoyed these discussions about capital projects. I agree with Mr. Rudolph that it's going to be important that we have what we call shovel-ready projects if there is going to be some funding opportunities, and I like that we've got different categories that we can look at and possibly qualify for. As council knows, I've mentioned in the past, I've been a little bit impatient on wanting to move ahead with some of the major projects, and I'd still like council to consider, and Mr. Rudolph to consider the option of packaging 2 or 3 of our expensive items and doing a borrowing referendum and seeing how that flies with the public. And I'm talking things like the RCMP building and the Public Works yard as 2 of my top priorities, along with possibly the South End Centre. So that's something I still think we should keep in mind. And in terms of the rest, I think as long as we're in a position that we can take advantage of any funding opportunities that come our way, then we'll be well served. Thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrock, and then Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Worship. I think in terms of needs that we have coming down the pipe. I think the RCMP and the public works facility is something that we should have as ready as possible in case of funding. I like projects that will be improving, public transportation infrastructure, specifically around active transportation. So funding for the Metro Drive, the sewer bikeway, Bowen bikeway plan, and then also I think the Wake-Asaya corridor is something that it would be interesting to look into more. I think, we're looking at capital projects where, there could be a significant ROI, depends where the development is happening, and increasing the property values and the potential for development in areas, and also areas that are under heavy use. I think that's an important area to focus on. And then I think, in terms of just innovation around looking at, innovative projects for climate change, and that I really like the NAC Geothermal project. I know it's in early stages of just looking at whether it is even financially feasible and feasible on many levels, but that's an area that I definitely have interest in, and it could open up greater possibilities for Nanaimo in terms of the use of geothermal down the road. Thanks. So just to add on Councillor Thorpe's idea, I think that is an avenue to hold into consideration, is a public borrowing referendum on capital projects and packaging a few together. That's an interesting thought, and it is a way that we could inject some cash into the economy if we need to, and get things done while the borrowing rate is extremely low. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Worship. I agree with a lot that has been said. I'm just concerned about just building capital projects for the one-time economic stimulus. I think that might be a little nearsighted in a certain sense when we have limited dollars. So sort of the way I've been trying to look through these projects is through the lens of obviously they're public expenditures of dollars, but do they have a domino effect in attracting private investment? And I use the Wake-Asaya corridor as an example. One, I think it's a great project for a few reasons. The street upgrade, the underground utilities need to be done. But it takes 12,000 automobiles a day. It's a major transportation corridor from transit, walking, and bus. It's in the Harewood plan, it's in the TMP. The OCP designates whole one side of it as corridor. So I imagine a project like that, coupled with getting creative with the planning, city-led rezoning, to unlock development potential, to leverage every one of our dollars to potentially earn more for the city in terms of jobs and that sort of thing. So that I don't think all the projects on this list necessarily meet that criteria, and so I think that's an important conversation. Is we have limited spending capacity, and it would be wonderful to package a bunch of these up and take them to referendums. What happens if you're defeated? We need a certain adaptability and nimbleness if we're serious about COVID recovery, and so I think there's quite a few considerations that need to go into refining these lists. And, it would be great to build the South End Recreation Center, but then raise this, okay, if we borrow a certain amount, what do we have to do? Raise taxes to pay for that debt servicing? And more importantly, what kind of operational impacts are there now to, again, raise taxes when there's an uncertainty of what these next years would look like? I don't want to be in a situation where we're having to continually deliver tax increases. So all that to say, I think that this list is a great starting point, but I think I would have preferred if we took a different lens of looking through this and not just saying, oh, it would be great to have these facilities, but what is the potential impact, the positive impact of proceeding with a certain capital project on providing long-term or longer-term economic positives.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. And I guess my question is regarding how do we get these things forward to be shovel-ready? It's my understanding that plans have to be drawn up to the point where we've got a fairly good design plan up and costing. So is that in our budget to do it for all these projects? Are they already there? Where are we at with all that? Like, how do we move these ones forward? I guess the question, or anyone forward.
Mr. Rudolph.
Your Worship, the answer is it depends on the project. Most of those public works capital projects have design, well, they'd be at different stages of design and funding for that. I suspect there will be less of a robust answer on the recreation and parks facilities. Certainly nothing's been done at this stage other than even preliminary conceptual for the South Chase River Rec Center. It's just an idea. We could move it to some sort of conceptual level. That's one thing. There's been various attempts at the RCMP. There are some draft drawings of things, 2 or 3 versions of that are in the drawers that I found, but nothing has moved forward. And that, I mean, we need to really start from a fresher sheet of paper on that one. Conceptual working drawings, just conceptual for the public works yard, nothing detailed. That would be. But that's possible that there could be funding inside available for that. Most of these smaller projects are at different stages in the recreation, so it really depends on the project. What we're hoping to get is, without committing major financial dollars to get to a level, is some, at least for conversation purposes, is there an interest to us come back with a business case around those ones in the green at the top, without necessarily having all the design details available. We'll do what we have. Not asking for any authorization to detail it out, but just an order of magnitude and sort of a fleshing out of the business case for it, which would then inform going to next stages at some point in time. So right now they're stalled. They're not doing anything, and we need to find a way to move forward. So we're seeking your direction to do that, and I would drop the fire hall off that list as immediate, but it's on the horizon. We just want to make sure you're aware of that. So the Public Works and the RCMP are the 2 very significant facilities that are high in cost and could be, one of those could possibly be phased. Is there an interest, at least for conversation purposes, for the South End Community Center, or does Council wish to continue to have that rolled into the current review of the Parks, Rec and Culture Master Plan, which is going to happen? And as far as the waterfront walkway, we can report back to you on some of the background work that's taking place on that in a not too distant future date, so you're aware of that anyways. That's something that's been funded and is in the queue anyway. And then an interest in the concept of the stadium area as being an entity where we look for opportunities to enhance that, the robustness of that. Partnerships possibly with the school district and the university. So there's quite a potential of synergies there. And then a long list of smaller projects that might be candidates for grants, but we also have to look big. And we're just, so it's just, again, going back to the green projects on this list, is there an appetite for us to go back and at least give you a report on each of those? Or just a couple of those. And then anything else on this list that you would like to see more information in a shorter time frame. Again, just one of the piers that have more potential in the short term is this artificial turf field at Harewood. I think there's potential to move that. And it's a relatively, compared to some of these projects, affordable project. Anyway, we're just putting it out there. Again, it was spawned by the ask by the MP if there's anything that on the capital side that you'd like him to advocate for. We're just trying to get ourselves as shovel ready as possible and certainly align what staff's doing with council's priorities.
In order, Councillors Brown, Armstrong, and Martin.
Thank you, Worship. I had accidentally left my hand up, but I'll just express support for the waterfront walkway and the RCMP facility and the green list. I also would add the Wakeside corridor because it already has consultation. It meets lots of plans. I just think there's so much upside to that project.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I don't know if this is the appropriate place or not, but I do think one thing that we should be looking at is maybe, and I don't think more than that people also, is to get the Nanaimo Regional General Hospital more funding there from the federal government, because they haven't done that for a while, and we've heard from everybody, and we've seen what's happened through COVID. We need a bigger hospital. So whether it's just a letter or something, you know, when we to Mr. Manley saying this is an area we would really like to see explored for adding more federal grant money. At the last hospital board, you know, they couldn't even do half the projects, replace them that are badly needed because they don't have the budget. So there's that one. And then for the projects, you know, I think if you come up with sports or cultural grants, because you never know what type of grant they're going to do. So I would like to see that one. And the other thing that we do have ready, even though it failed the last one, was the Port Theatre. From an arts and cultural perspective, if they had thrown more, that one's also ready to go for the plans all the time. Thank you.
Councillor Markman and then Councillor Bonner.
Thank you. I'm just getting down to being a little bit more specific, because the letter actually indicates if there are shovel-ready projects on your books that help to address climate change, affordable housing, create a more resilient and regenerative economy, these are the projects that should be promoted to the federal government. So I'm wondering, with this list that we have before us through you, is this a full list that we would be intending to give to MP Paul Manley, or are we looking at specific items out of this list that we would forward? Because I'm not sure that they meet the same criteria that he has in the letter.
So, Your Worship, I wasn't convinced or sure that those criteria were Mr. Manley's criteria or the federal government's criteria. So I believe they're more Mr. Manley's criteria, what he would like to advocate for. That may be overstepping my realm there, but certainly we're not aware of what the criteria might be for grants coming forward, so he might be anticipating that, and he may not be quite very wrong on that.
Right.
Don't say that, but so there's right now we don't have any criteria from the federal government beyond what we kind of know, so they may be coming up with more grants, so we can only speculate at this stage. So I think that's what he's attempting to do, is speculate, but he's probably putting his lens on it like we all would. And again, this was a broader conversation, and then there's the specific one and it's a good example of if one of our senior government elected officials contact us and say, what is your list of priorities? And this goes back to the advocacy conversation that you had before. What would be on that list? Right. And this was just the capital side of that conversation, and it's not all encompassing as we've noted. So I don't know if we can draw out of this conversation today a response to MP Manley. That's a fair comment. But that wasn't intent. That was just really as an example of that. How do we get ourselves to a place where we are able to advocate?
Right.
And that's so we're trying to narrow the list down to a few critical projects. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to thank Mr. MP Manley for asking anyway, regardless of whether they're his suggestions or not. I think it's grand that we actually have an MP doing that. On terms of what do we have shovel ready, I'm wondering if we would look at past granting from the federal government, if we're going that route, on their basic ministries. Culture and Heritage Canada, should we have a couple of shovel-ready projects for that ministry, various other ministries, infrastructure grants coming out of the federal government, that sort of thing. So to me, a broad range of grants ready to go, I think it's great. I would certainly support the project that Councillor Brown mentioned as well, and the ones in the green list. Thanks much.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I agree that it's very wise that we have a range of projects that we're identifying that could possibly qualify for some type of grant money, but I also think we have to look at what our city priorities are, regardless of whether there's going to be grants coming our way for them or not. So I go back to that first list, and I would definitely, to answer Mr. Rudolph's earlier question, be in favor of more information related to the Public Works facility and the RCMP building. To me, it's like what are nice to haves and what do we need to have, and those are two things that I think we really do need to have, and we need to start looking at them now. The waterfront walkway, as we all know, has been strongly supported by the community, but I see that as something that we're going to approach, as we have so far, incrementally. And as we get funding opportunities, we can move ahead maybe piece by piece with that. So I don't quite put that in the same category as some of the other major capital projects that we've identified. But those are my thoughts, so I would certainly be interested in moving ahead with information regarding Public Works and RCMP, if nothing else. Thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Worship. Just to reiterate the projects that be interested in having further information. Like's already been said, RCMP facility, Public Works facility, I think the waterfront walkway along Departure Bay. I agree with Councillor Brown about the Wakeside corridor. I think looking at that project, I think there could be quite a positive ROI on moving that one forward earlier. Also, another one, and it's a question for Mr. Sims, in terms of the Terminal Nicole corridor. I know it was up for some infrastructure upgrades. Where is that project sort of in terms of its progression along in our process?
Worship, at this point, it's still in conceptual design. So it's something that's been hanging there that needs the additional sort of push.
Okay. Something like that, be interested in, and then sort of on the more innovative and probably farther away, but just in case there's an interesting funding pot, again, the knick-knack geothermal. Thank you.
Anything further?
Do we need any resolutions?
Would you like them?
Worship, I'm just wondering if council wants to put any of this into the form of a resolution, which would be more informative for all of us, if there's anything there. There could be specific projects, or it could be a general direction.
I forget which of you commented exactly. I think it was Councillor Bonner around having a list of projects available in the various areas. I mean, we've already, the Port Theatre, for instance, there's nothing to stop us having that as a priority. Once again, everything's done, ready to go. We all know what it is. We have an estimate of what it's going to cost, etc. So it's already prepped. But the waterfront walkway, we're waiting to, what shall I say, get a little more public information on that, so to speak. The South End Community Centre, I think, has come up numerous times. And keeping in mind, we're looking at a list that features significant capital projects versus investment improvements, which is the way that the list is put together. From a crass voting perspective, with great respect, nobody's going to get re-elected. Great deference to Superintendent Miller, who's not here now, on building a new police station. But they might get re-elected on the basis of building in Oliver Woods. So I just want to be straightforward with the public in terms of the crass considerations that the process goes through in circumstances like this. Some of these things would be greatly more popular. If we can do things to enhance baseball in this community, which brings people to watch baseball games on weekends all through the summer, that's a positive economic driver. Also good for encouraging young people to become more engaged in sports. There's a number of ways to go at it. I think we have come to some sort of common ground, and I'm looking to for someone to make a motion, but it seems to me we are looking potentially for more information on the South End Community Center, potentially RCMP, the Public Works facility. I mean, I think we've all been through that facility, and if you want to talk about a facility that, if you were judging this community by the quality of that facility, you'd say we really were a hick town in a hick universe. It's a pretty rough-looking headquarters for what is one of the most basic and important functions for municipal government. So I'm in your hands, folks. I don't want to go through a raising of hands, but we're looking for more information, basically, at this stage, if I'm not mistaken. Mr. Rudolph?
Can I offer that, unless council is opposed to this, we would go back and prepare a better set of briefing materials for you on each of the major projects at the top, with the possible exception of the fire halls, because that's going to be subject to that review process this year. And we can come back with another information report for you in the next 2 months, kind of thing. And any other guidance that you might have with respect to any of these, we were thinking that there could be a possibility of bundling projects either by geographic area and or by type, in that they could be, instead of, have 3 or 4 smaller projects, and then we throw that at a grand opportunity. The point is being strategic about what our future capital needs are, and strategic about responding to COVID, and strategic about what grants might be out there, and having as much preparedness as possible. So certainly the ones at the top are beyond scope and not in budget now, and we're trying to find a way to at least move those to a place where we're clear on what we're talking about and anticipating a method of moving forward, with the possibility of a referendum at the election or some other point in time.
I think that's a reasonable approach, and one thing I want to mention again, it's already been brought up by Councillor Gesselbrock, is the Terminal Nickel Street Reimagine. That is a stretch of our community. Most people who come in and out of now are going to pass along that stretch of roadway. With great deference to those who've tried to make improvements so far to their own private premises, passing by the hole and then the A&B Sound building, etc., all the way to the bridge is, how shall I say, if that's what you saw of Nanaimo, you wouldn't be overly impressed. And I don't have any idea of costs. I participated in that process and did the tour, but I think that is worth considering in terms of improving. We voted in favor of the improvements to Front Street, including bike lanes, etc. Terminal Avenue is a prime candidate for enhancement of this community. There is some I believe there was private interest around the Manly store a few years ago. If the A&B Sound folks are interested, I think there's some opportunities there that will appeal to Councillor Brown. Looking at this through the economic lens, it would enhance the downtown, and I just think that's one I'd like personally to hear from staff about.
Your Worship, we also heard some interest in re-examining the timing of Wakesaya today, clearly from several councillors. So I think it's incumbent on us to come back to you with an update on that and for your information. So we haven't lost that just because it's not on the list. And if there's any other projects not on the list that you would like us to come back to you with, we certainly would be pleased to do that.
The Wakesaya has interest because I think, as Mr. Rudolph has pointed out himself, there's clearly a significant potential between the university, the school district, and the city around common recreational facilities. BIU needs a new gym, amongst many other things. It's easily accessible off the Inland Island Highway. It's always struck me that was a logical place to put public monies together to make something happen that would be useful for everybody 24/7, quite literally. Comments, councillors?
Councillor Bonner and
Councillor Bonner and Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Worship. A quick question, if I may. Looking at the report on the attachment B, if it has a green check and it's in their current financial plan, do we have drawings for it already, or is it just something that's in their preliminary?
Well, it depends on the project. For the most part, if we're out of the green area at the top of the page and we're into the subcategories, many of these projects, not all, I've heard somewhere in the funding stream, and Ms. Fuller could explain probably each one of them in detail, but with the exception of the Port Theatre expansion, I think most of these are funded at some point in time in a 5-year capital. Is that true?
Actually, my question was not so much that. I know they're in the plan. Is if they have a green check mark beside them and they're in the 4th column, do we actually have plans for them?
Some of them with the green check, it has, say, for example, design in 1 year with construction further out. So design is budgeted, but may not be completed yet, but it's planned with construction in a later year.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Worship. First, I just wanted to voice support absolutely for the terminal Nico Reimagined. I think those projects like the Wakasaya give us funding options, but also give us a lot of potential for using a lot of policy tools to help spur different developments. So if it would help, I would like to move that we receive reports on the future significant capital projects list, and also including the Wakasaya project and the terminal Nico Reimagined project.
Second.
Any discussion? Consensus is a lovely thing. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. I think this has been useful. Anything further on potential capital projects? I think so. Bylaws, status sheet for information only. Notices of motion. I do want to just throw this out quickly, and I know hopefully all of you have seen it. I would have received a copy of a letter today from Mayor Buchanan of the City of North Vancouver addressed to Attorney General Eby suggesting relaxation of as much as he possibly can the rules from the liquor branch around restaurants and patios and opportunities. There is strong local interest. Councillor Brown and Mr. Smythe, CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, Monica Briggs, the Old City Quarter, and others have expressed an interest as this being a potentially quick way to help revive our stricken restaurant hospitality industry. And Councillor Brown had suggested in an email to me quickly before the meeting today that in response to my request that I'd be happy to send a letter supporting that without a motion, suggested it might carry more weight with the motion. I do hate motions on the fly, even when I'm suggesting them, and I know Councillor Thorpe and I eat them on that issue because they often lead to unnecessarily prolonged debate and results that aren't terribly useful. But if there is some interest in this, simply that I would be directed or asked to, or Council pass a resolution that I write a letter in support of what the City of North Vancouver has requested, I'd be happy to do so. But I'll leave it with Councillor Brown here.
I would like to move that motion, Your Worship.
Second.
And Councillor Bonner was a close third. Have all of you had a chance, I trust, to actually see the Mayor's letter? Does it present difficulties for anybody before I call for a vote if there's no discussion? Councillor Bonner?
Thank you, Your Worship. Having watched all of the directives that have come out of the Liquor License Control Branch over the last month and a half, my concern was that, not concern, it was I was glad to see some of the edicts being relaxed a bit and a little bit more flexibility, only to see later on that the Liquor License Control issued more regulations putting time limits on these things. So I would definitely like to see a little bit more flexibility from the Liquor License Control Board so that we're not all stuck in 1920s mentality. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you very much. I appreciate that. question period. We obviously, Ms. Gurry?
You missed the agenda planning section.
Oh, sorry, the agenda planning. How could I jump ahead?
Could have been attached all.
Not at all.
So can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Just on the agenda planning, this is a special council meeting, but we are covering the GPC item list that you normally get at your Governance and Priorities Committee meeting. So attached to your agenda, page 104 to 110 is the calendar of future Governance and Priorities Committee meetings, as well as a list of your topics that you have planned out in the past for meetings we've already had and meetings going into the future. So just to give you an update on May 25th, which was supposed to be a GPC meeting and will be a special council meeting, you will be going over social procurement, which was going to go to a finance and audit, but now we've changed it back to a GPC, which is a special council, if you're following the bouncing balls. And as well as MOESS, if we can manage to get the appropriate people know to come and in a social distancing delegation manner, and we'll have that meeting at the Shaw Auditorium in order to facilitate that. So that's what we have scheduled for the next meeting, May 25th. Today was Advocacy. And after that on your list, you have transportation. And based on your conversation last Monday, Councillor Armstrong, I was just wondering if the transportation item day for GPC kind of covers what you wanted to talk about and have more conversation on around pedestrian safety. It is outlined on that transportation day. And if council would like to proceed with that as at its next meeting. So just looking for some feedback from you on that.
Councillor Armstrong, and then Councillor Gesselbrock, and Councillor Turley, and Bonner.
What I got from that meeting, I think it's important, I think we heard it loud and clear from a lot of the questions you got back, is how the criteria is determined. So I would like to have conversation around that, is where we get a determination, et cetera, et cetera. And I realize some we're not going to be able to talk about because of legal stuff, but even if we just talked about it in general terms. Thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrock?
Thank you, Worship. Just from our conversation today around advocacy, around homelessness and addiction, today was a talk on advocacy, and I'm not sure if this was the talk on advocacy that we had planned when we were going to do it in a two-step process, and I'm hoping that we're having that discussion for homelessness and addiction, and if we can set a date so that it gives enough time for it to go to the Health and Housing Task Force for their discussion, and then to come to a GPC for us to discuss, and all the other ideas that have been tossed around but never really formalized in discussion. That was my impression of the process, but I could have been wrong. So a question to council is, do we need to schedule a discussion on homelessness and addiction and advocacy at a GPC ASAP? Thank you.
I'm going to go to Ms. Gurry before I go to Councillors Turley and Bonner in that order.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Gesselbrock. I think that we could add it to the list with the date to be announced, because I think it does, based on your earlier motion, need to go through that process first, Health and Housing, before it comes back to your table to talk about. So I think we could put it on this list with the date to be announced. I think we can't schedule it until it's actually happened at their meeting.
Yeah.
I agree with that, and having it come back for a discussion once it's done at that Health and Housing Task Force to council at a GPC, is that what other councillors' impression of what we were going to do happen, process, or not? Yeah.
I see some nods and thumbs up. I think that's the general understanding. Councillor Turley and then Councillor Bonner, please.
Thank you, Worship. So my question is to do with the GPC on the 25th and the MOESS version 13. I'm getting a significant number of messages from people in the development community, any concern that it's not going to be discussed by council and is just going to go ahead. I've assured them that no, it has to be approved by council. And there's several that want to make presentations to council and staff at a meeting. And I think I heard Ms. Curry say that there will be the opportunity at the Shaw Auditorium to make a personal presentation, or is it going to be online?
Your Worship, through you, Councillor Turley, we are looking at having it at the Shaw Auditorium so that whoever does want to come, the developers, etc., could wait outside of the auditorium until it's their time to come in, and we can practice and maintain that physical distancing to have them appear in person. However, the problem that I'm trying to work out with Mr. Sims, or he'll have to work out because I'm going to be on vacation, is how do we get that word out so that it's fair to everyone, and that they all have that opportunity to come and appear if they have a stake in it and want to make a presentation. So it's just a matter of trying to get the word out to those that need to have it. So we're just working on those details. If we can't manage that for the 25th, then we would postpone it until we were able to get everybody on board and able to attend if they wished to.
There's about, I think, 6 of them that are waiting to hear from me as to when it is and where it is. So I'm assuming I can safely say the meeting will be at the Shaw Auditorium starting at 1 o'clock on the 25th. And social distancing will be the norm.
Yes, distancing, yes, and Councillor Turley, you might want to suggest that they contact the clerk's office to...
Yeah, no, I plan on that too, yeah.
Okay.
What's the deadline prior to that meeting? Is it Thursday, the week before? To make application to speak?
Friday at 11.
Friday at 11.
Friday at 11. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to double check. When we're referring to the conversation on transportation, are we referring to the one specifically titled Transit Part 1 and Crosswalk Safety?
Not sure. Ms. Curry?
I'm sorry, Your Worship, I didn't hear.
If you could repeat the question, Councillor Bonner. Ms. Curry was occupied.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm trying to figure out exactly which one, when we're talking about transportation, to be the one after the 25th. Are we specifically talking about the one that seems to be titled Transit Part 1 and Crosswalk Safety? It's all the ones that are in that area?
That's correct.
I'm not seeing anything. Okay, yeah, I'm not seeing anything marked transportation. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Councillor Bonner. I think it was transit and crosswalk safety. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure that all of those items that were discussed at the last meeting were captured in that as well. Yeah. Sorry, I called it.
May I just bring up something to muddle it up even more? We are getting some requests from citizens regarding the ability, once we're allowed to more get out of our houses and start to social interact, the ability to maintain distances properly on sidewalks, and some people are suggesting possibility of redoing some of our streets, closing them down to a certain amount of traffic, that sort of thing. I wouldn't mind being able to have a slight conversation in that time about that as well, if possible.
And Ms. Leggett has a comment.
If I may, Your Worship, to Council. The other item for May 25th, social procurement. I just want to manage expectations with respect to the work that has not occurred on this file given COVID. We've been inundated in purchasing and procurement, and as of this morning, there's agreement with Ms. Mercer and myself that I would personally run this project, and I just need some time to work with the consultant, obviously continue to work with Ms. Mercer and with Ms. Rushton, our purchasing manager, to move it forward. I have a philosophical bent in favor of social procurement, have worked on this type of file in the past, and will be attending with other councillors when invited some of the forums that are already in place, some of the organizations that the city belongs to with respect to this file, and I'd like to bring a more fulsome, actionable plan forward, so would request more time than May 25th. I could still talk to it, but only briefly on May 25th.
I suspect that there'll be sympathy for that position, Ms. Legan. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. So obviously I really want to have this transit conversation. I'm just wondering if it's, obviously there's additional considerations with COVID, and transit has been a really impacted service, especially with funding, and it might have ramifications, and we're still waiting for the collective we, the RDNs, all local governments around, any potential transit bailouts, what funding's going to look like, some major gaps that can present problems for our transit system. So I'm just wondering if May 25th might be just a little premature to have that conversation, because the landscape could look very different 2-3 weeks after that once hopefully some more information comes in. Just putting that out there, because I don't want us to have a discussion and then 2 weeks later we find out that our system may be in a drastically different place and some of the things that we discussed are no longer valid.
Wise comments, Councillor Brown. Ms. Gurry?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, and I do recall that was decided too, that it might be, because of COVID, not the ideal time to have this conversation. Maybe it could be split into two, and transit could be its own, and then crosswalk safety, pedestrian safety could be another. And just also to keep in mind to council that GPCs are on hold, and we're doing special council meetings, yet we're having GPC topics at those special council meetings. So there will be other items as well. So if we don't get to it at the next one after May 25th, we should be okay. And council can always come to a decision next meeting on the 25th about that.
Nicely said. Anything else on the agenda planning?
Your Worship, if I may, the city has to get back to a reopening plan. Part of that is the council meeting formats and that type of thing. We're aware of that. So part of that is how we're scheduling things. We mentioned we're treating this special council like a GPC in a way. And so we'd like to continue to brief you and inform you and discuss with you how do we do that. And so it's part of it's the committees and task forces and engagement with council and having you here or on digitally. We're expecting guidelines from government on reopening. We're hoping for that. We were told by the minister that we could expect that over the coming weeks. But that does affect your legislative piece here, and so it's challenging to make it fair and transparent and open for all parties that may want to speak to items. And so we're aware of that. We'll keep you briefed on every occasion that we can. Perhaps in 2 weeks we'll have more information on that. And I know there's been questions around question period and all that. We certainly won't introduce any new or changed formats without your understanding and blessing about that. But certainly we now need to have a reopening plan, not only for the legislative side, but for the operational side. And we'll be coming back to you with some ideas around that in the coming weeks. So I just want to mention on this part of it, we're kind of we have a hybrid situation going now, but where does the new normal, if we're continually using that term, where does the new normal sit in terms of the foreseeable future with respect to council meetings, GPC, and that type of thing? So we're alive to that. We need to be thinking about that. So maybe at the next special council meeting, we could have a bit of more of a robust conversation around that too, just to help plan.
Ms. Gurry and then Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just to add to what Mr. Rudolph said, yes, we're looking at bringing some more information on the 25th, and like he said, not making any more changes. We'll come to council first, and they're in trying to figure out a good process for question period and how that would work for everyone. We didn't receive any today, so I just wanted council to be aware of that.
Thank you. Councillor Brown. and then Councillor Thorpe.
Sorry, Your Worship, I accidentally left my hand up.
It's all right, it's not a capital offense. Councillor Thorpe and then Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I think I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, in my opinion, that having a transit inspection right now might be premature, and I would certainly suggest that we wait until we feel that we're on firmer ground as far as where the transit funding and service levels are, and hopefully we'll know that fairly soon, but right now we don't. Looking at the list of items, I have to personally say I'm wondering about the crosswalk safety topic. Of course, it's important, but I felt that we got reports at our last council meeting, I believe it was, that covered this information fairly extensively, and we had discussion at that time. So I don't know what could be added to the information that we've already received, or whether council wishes to discuss that further. And while I am speaking, I'll just thank Mr. Rudolph from Missouri for reminding me about question period, and I would suggest that at some point we might want to just have a session on our procedure bylaw and have another look at that. I know we've made changes to it fairly recently, but again, I think it's sort of a living document, and I would certainly like to have a discussion about question period as we move forward. Thank you.
Timely suggestion, Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Worship. Couple points. First, just on what Councillor Thorpe said about that question period, I remember there was also something about proclamations, but maybe if we do spend a little bit of time on sort of council housekeeping type things, well, not the question period falls under that category, but also address the proclamation issue and if there's anything else like that. The other one was just to Ms. Lagan's comments about not having the time thus far to work closely and move the social procurement discussion as far as we would have liked. Are we planning to postpone that conversation and not have an update, which I'm totally in favor of. I prefer that the work that was intended to be done first before we have anybody come to council. So just clarification on that point.
Ms. Lagan?
Yes, through you to Councillor Gesselbrock. Yes, that would be our intention. I suspect it will still be June, early summer. We want to accelerate it, but we do want to do it properly. So postponing is ideal. Yeah.
And Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to address Councillor Gesselbrock's item of proclamations, just to make sure he's aware and all the council's aware. We do proclamations through the mayor's office. We have a really good, streamlined and efficient way of doing proclamations that just go directly through that request process, and then they're proclaimed on our website and through the city of Nanaimo that way. A number of years they did come to council meetings. However, we get an extensive amount from everything from Bumblebee Week to Jay-Z Week to, there's a number of proclamations, and it is an extensive amount of added time to a council meeting. So that was streamlined a number of years ago. So I just want to make sure council's aware we do proclamations. They're just not through the agenda, and they're directly through the mayor's office. And there's also a political aspect to some of those proclamations as well that causes some controversy once in a while. So I do prefer the system we have now. I just wanted to say that.
Let me just say that if we're going to collectively say buzz off, there will be a political consequence for it. Mr. Sims.
Thank you. Just to touch on Councillor Thorpe's point about the pedestrian safety and crosswalk. So Council might recall that was our intent to bring that whole discussion in front of you 2 weeks ago. And we deliberately, as a result of the situation with transit, we left that component away discussion at the meeting generated a bit more question about what are the specifics of our say our crosswalk checklist. Thank you. Our intent going forward was really that was a look back at where we were, and as you know, we're into launching our active transportation plan, and that is more the opportunity to have those more detailed discussions. So I'd ask council to consider that we've kind of checked the box as far as the GPC agenda item is concerned, barring the conversation around transit, but that there will be future conversations around, as part of the active transportation program and the public input into those criteria. We're always prepared to have more detailed discussions, and we certainly took the point on having those transportation discussions with greater transparency, and we're looking at ways we can improve that. I just offer that up.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. Anything further? Very good. Next step.
Motion for adjournment.
Thank you, Councillor Martman. Seconded. Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. A very productive day. Appreciation to staff.